The Dan Crenshaw, Tim Miller debate. I wanted to host a debate between a never Trumper and a Trumper, but we're not going to have the never Trumper versus Trumper debate because no Trumpers that we recruited wanted to debate the never Trumpers. It was a topic that either they were scared to have or didn't want to have, or they thought was not strategically smart this close to the election. And so we just couldn't make it happen. Maybe it'll happen after the election. It might become a more pertinent issue because you might be talking about the future of the Republican Party post-Trump if he loses. So maybe after the election, depending on the outcome, that could depend if we actually end up having the conversation or we try to revisit the topic with new vigor. Point is though, we couldn't have the debate. They didn't want to have the debate, and so it didn't happen. Instead, I've stumbled upon this Piers Morgan interview between Tim Miller of The Bulwark, who follows me on Twitter, so he can't be that bad. He also worked on the Jeb Bush campaign, so, you know, good job on that one. And over there we have Dan Crenshaw, who is the representative from the state of Texas, who is known as being quite conservative, but he is not a Matt Gaetz conservative. He's a more traditional Reaganite conservative who's found himself having to defend Donald Trump on tariffs, defend Donald Trump post J6, defend Donald Trump after he called for the suspension of the U.S. Constitution, and he's in the difficult position of defending a man who would not defend many of the values that he has made part and parcel of his ideology for the entirety of his time in public office. And so let's listen to this back and forth, because it seems to be every time this discussion happens with somebody who acknowledges that January 6th was bad, which he does, it seems to be the idea of, well, even if, you know, Donald Trump still doesn't respect the election outcomes, I'm sure the checks and balances will handle it. He left office last time, he'll leave office next time, which is, you know, I don't know how many attempts you really want to give an arsonist to play with fire just because the fire department stopped them last time, but whatever. Let's check out this debate. There we go.
Tweeted yesterday that the more I of Kamala Harris's interviews, the more word salady and inconsequential and unsubstantial the rhetoric that comes from her mouth appears to be. There's a lot of...
Can I also just throw out there that Harris just agreed after that 60 Minutes interview, which Trump skipped, she just agreed to do a CNN town hall, so she better be on her best behavior, because if there's anything the campaign doesn't need right now, it's a slip up. But you know, I think the campaign's right that she needs to introduce herself to the general public more. One of the biggest issues when you're talking to undecided voters seems to be that when it comes to Harris, that they just don't know enough about her. That's probably not the issue when it comes to Trump. You've got 9 years to know him. You haven't really got to know her much as a VP candidate or as a vice president of the United States. She's just not front and center, which is, of course, not the role of the vice president. Their job is to basically be a president a heartbeat away if something was to happen, and to break tie-breaking votes. And so the main thing that she can claim from her vice presidency is the breaking of tie-breaking votes. But even when that happened, it didn't get much press, and most people don't know about her record as a prosecutor, or her record as a DA, or her time in politics in California, or whatever she did during her time as senator. So she needs to introduce herself to the public, introduce her policies to the public, and to give herself some form of identity so people can trust her and get to know her, which sounds silly. Like the idea of like, who is Kamala Harris? She's the daughter of an immigrant. Like that story, while it seems silly to somebody who might be like a policy wonk, that does matter in campaigns. If people perceive you as a out of touch, snobby, establishment type, even if you've got all the best policies, that could cost you double-digit points.
Of joy that she wants to sprinkle, but no real clear idea about how this is going to happen. What do you make of Kamala Harris, the candidate?
Well, if you were in her position, you would also give word salads, because you don't want to actually contend with the fact that the last 4 years are indeed your positions. And it's even worse than that, because she, let's not forget, she ran to the left of Joe Biden. So her positions are generally far more progressive and far more crazy than Joe Biden's even are. She did.
I'm sorry, but what was the crazy far left policies of Joe Biden during the last 4 years? Like, when I think of like the infrastructure bill, the CHIPS Act, all the bipartisan pieces of legislation he passed, there's very little in that I would describe as really even like left. Like the child tax credit, is it the tax credit that was far left? Is it the protection to abortion access? Because I would say it's not that Democrats are far left on abortion access. Roe versus Wade was overturned. It's that the right has run rightward, and they kept running, and then they overturned Roe versus Wade, and now political repercussions are coming back, and the Democrats are roosting, roosting. Democrats are harvesting the fruits of Republican labor, which is the political headwinds. So I just don't know what would be I think Biden's not left-wing enough for me. I didn't vote for Biden in the primary. I voted Bernie. I was not happy that Biden was our nominee in 2020. I wanted somebody much more progressive that broke with what you would call the establishment at the time, or whatever. I wanted somebody who was more progressive on drug decriminalization, or somebody who was more aggressive on healthcare. I wanted somebody who I think didn't have some of the same foreign policy blunders that Joe Biden had, even if Bernie Sanders is not particularly experienced with it. There is left-wing reasons that I went for Bernie. Joe Biden was the compromise candidate. Joe Biden was the safety candidate. Joe Biden was the guy you go for because you think he can beat Trump, and that's what's important candidate. So what was these far left policies from the last 4 years? I mean, you can't on one hand say Joe Biden stole all of Donald Trump's ideas and kept his immigration thing here, here, and here, but then also say he was a far left loon.
Want to ban fracking. She did want Medicare for all. She wanted all of these things. But even if she has come to Jesus and changed her mind on all of that, we can
even the things that I wouldn't even call far left, but maybe like lefty or center left. For example, like a public option on healthcare. We've seen no movement on that during the Biden presidency whatsoever.
These things. But even if she has come to Jesus and changed her mind on all of that, we can rest assured that she is completely in favor, and she said this in an interview recently, that she wouldn't change anything from the Biden administration. And so why was Biden so unpopular? Why was Trump going to beat Biden so easily just a few months ago? Because his policies are very unpopular, and people need to understand that those same policies and the outcomes associated with those policies belong entirely to Kamala Harris. So it doesn't surprise me one bit that she doesn't want to talk about policy, that instead she wants to talk about, I don't know, having beer on late night shows, or just having this a nice little laugh on The View, whatever it is. She wants people to like her and forget about the bad policies that actually affect.
Honestly, Biden was polling fine for a decent amount of their race. Biden, in fact, was ahead. Even if he wasn't strongly ahead, he was either tied or slightly ahead for a decent portion of the race. Then the age issue became bigger and bigger and bigger and sunk him. That's not to say that he won on all the issues. For example, inflation was a big thing that was holding him down economically. But I mean, inflation's been brought largely under control since then. So I don't know how you're going to say it was the policies that led to Biden doing so bad. No, it's the fact that Biden's 82 years old and people felt uncomfortable voting for grandpa to serve another 4 years, which is why they instead are going to go for the much chipper, younger, and spry 78-year-old man who is now the oldest nominee for American president, for the American presidency in history. So, I mean, yeah, I'm sure policies played some role, but for much of that portion he's talking about, Biden was ahead.
Their lives.
Yeah, I mean,
if you look at the aggregate polling, 1 second. Yeah, at the start, if you look at January 2023 and February 2023, I'm looking at it now, he was ahead 3 or 4 points. Then they were within 2 points of each other for April and May and June and July as Trump pulls ahead. Then we get into, December of 2023, January 2024, and then Trump starts to pull ahead solidly again. And then in March and April, Biden starts to pull up again. And then April of 2024, May of 2024, disaster strikes. Around that time, debate happens, Trump skyrockets, Biden goes down, and he's out. So most of this, they were either neck and neck. Trump was a few points ahead, Biden was a few points ahead. So, I mean, I think the big thing that changed that caused Biden to drop out wasn't the policies, it was the fact that he was old.
I thought she won the debate against Trump. He fell into her trap, lured him in, and he nibbled hard, and she won it. So it's not that she's not capable, she is. I do feel, though, and I'd be curious what you think, would it not have been better for the Democrats when it was clear Biden couldn't continue and the knives came out for him? Would it not have been better for the Democrats to have had an internal battle to choose their nominee rather than just crown.
I'm sorry. I think that soon to the presidential election, I think this is a terrible idea. I thought it was a terrible idea at the time. I think it's a terrible idea now. Number one, let's say we can just ignore. This is the first problem. Ignore the financial problems, which is if people have donated to the Biden-Harris campaign, and then you have Pete Buttigieg or Big Gretch or J.B. Pritzker or Gavin Newsom or the dark horse Andrew Cuomo, or you get any of these people, you run them for president, they're not going to be able to use the Biden-Harris money because they were not on the Biden-Harris ticket. Harris was on the ticket, so she can freely access the money. I'm sure there's some workarounds you can get to, but that's more work, more problems, and they want less problems. That's the first issue. Second thing is, well, Harris didn't have good favorabilities. She's recovered since then. The favorability issue's basically gone away. If you check out the Gallup polling and you say who's likable, Trump polls at 38, she polls at 60. So she has taken up a lot of ground since the low likability ratings. It had some of the worst favorability ratings of any VP in history. She's now recovered quite well. But before recovering quite well, the favorabilities was like a big question. And even if it was a big question, though, remember this. She was on the national spotlight for 4 years and during the primary. Buttigieg, a little bit. Newsom, not really. Gretchen Whitmer, not really. When you go from local to state to then federal politics, then national as you're going to take over everything, there is a big shift in media attention. And if you were to run somebody like J.B. Pritzker as your nominee with very little vetting and no public say, meaning the public didn't get to vote at all for JD, they did vote for Harris. They voted for her to be the VP. And if you vote for somebody and they have a VP on their ticket, you voted for them under the understanding that the VP could become president. Especially with Biden being as old as he is, that was something people, acknowledged. And so Harris had votes. She was on a ticket that got votes. People voted for Biden thinking she could be president and she could freely access the money. Not to mention, you avoid any party infighting this close. When you're already taking so many risks and you're in so much uncharted territory, how many times do you really want to roll the D20? And so they chose to go with Harris. The favorability issue improved markedly. The fundraising issue improved overnight. And the rest is history. So, I could understand at the time not knowing for sure based on the favorability polling, which was my biggest concern. But looking back, I don't know how you could stand by this position. Looking back, I think it was clearly the correct decision.
Kamala Harris and hope for the best.
Yeah, maybe, Piers. I was pushing for Joe Biden to get out of the race because of his age, not because of his policies long before that. And unfortunately, it came too late. And he ended up with, kind of at a moment where there really wasn't time to do that. And his vice president has stepped up. As you pointed out, his vice president, Kamala Harris, crushed Donald Trump in that debate, absolutely annihilated her. So if her policies and if her rhetoric is that weak and if she's low IQ, like Donald Trump said, it's unclear why he was unable to make a single coherent argument against her that was not word salad. And frankly, I also just disagree with the congressman when it comes to the policies. I think that the Biden administration has had some policies that are too liberal for me, but much of what they passed has been bipartisan, including the infrastructure bill, including the CHIPS Act. The economy is coming in for a soft landing. The American economy is the envy of the world. And I think Kamala Harris has put out a pretty detailed economic policy that's far superior to Donald Trump's. What Donald Trump has put forth for his economic policy is a 20% across the board tariff, which I know Dan Crenshaw cannot possibly support, and just a budget busting $5 trillion.
This is the problem when someone like Dan Crenshaw, you cannot defend, even if he wanted to pretend to defend it, he cannot. After making such a principled position again on free trade and how tariffs and stuff like that, restrictions on trade, all it does is make things more expensive, etc. He cannot just switch that overnight. Not saying he wants to necessarily, but he couldn't even if he wanted to.
Possibly support. And just a budget busting $5 trillion more added to our deficit. That's Donald Trump's policies. So I think when it comes to rhetoric, preparation, and policy, she's superior. And lastly, I would just point out that at this point, I would think that the congressman should be able to know how to pronounce her name correctly.
Yeah, I mean, look, the obsession with how you pronounce her name, I think, is a bit ridiculous.
It's not obsession. Just pronounce it right. I
She's
don't call you
Kamala, she's
poor.
Kamala, she's, you know, I've heard Democrats pronounce it about
Just
8
do it.
different
What
ways.
do you mean, who cares? Just do it.
It's the first.
I've been called Piers by every American I've known for the last 20 years. My name is Piers, and yet every American's called
I
me
made
Piers.
some
I
intellectual
don't
points
care.
as well we can argue about, but you could just get it right. It's simple. It's not emotional. It's just get it right. It's not hard.
Yeah, but my point is it doesn't matter, right? Dan, just on that point, though, about Trump's economic policies and the tariffs in particular, your response?
I mean, he's way out of touch with what everyone in America knows and believes. Under Donald Trump, you had one of the best economies we had in 50 years. The thing that got in the way of that was the Chinese virus that came over. Don't interrupt
Tariffs
me.
we're talking
all right?
about. Are you for the 20% across the
What
board
we had under
tariff,
Trump
Congressman?
policies, what we
He
had,
doesn't want to answer the question.
Stop interrupting me, all right?
No, interrupt him. I'm sorry. And interrupt people when they do. I'm becoming less diplomatic. I'm for like letting people, you know, get their positions out. But if you ask somebody a specific question, and this is just become, of course, politicians have always done this, but it's become so normalized now. Just answering the question you wish you were asked. And the question he wished he was asked was, well, I think the Trump economy, do you think the Trump economy is better, and how is it better? And then he can go into his spiel. That's not what he was asked. He was asked about a specific policy, a 20% across the board tariff. If we put a 20% tariff on everything that entered the United States across the board, we're talking basic consumer products you would imagine from China, you know, like the little rinky-dinky things, all the way up to the imports that are necessary for inputs into our factories. So we're talking about like, you know, stuff like a ball bearing or whatever you would need in order to like make these machines that are made in America, and then we export to Europe or then, you know, export to Americans to consume. It's going to increase the costs on that. So it increased the costs on the factories, increased the costs on the businesses, and increased the costs on the American consumer by just 20% across the board. And we've heard Republicans complaining about inflation for all this time. Why did they complain about inflation? Because they didn't want to see Americans' dollar. They didn't want to see the consuming potential of Americans, the purchasing potential, be whittled down. But if you put a tariff on everything and make everything more expensive, then you're doing the same thing in effect. Are you not? And so he can't defend it. And so instead, he's just going to talk about the strength of the Trump economy, which, of course, talking about the strength of an economy during any term and attributing all of that to the current administration, whether it's during the Obama term, whether it's during the Trump term, whether it's during the Biden term, it's just a bunch of hoopla. Of course, some of it can be because of their policies, but a president can take over, have a good economy that's already on the right trajectory, do basically nothing, and call themselves an economic mastermind. Like that can be done not only by Republicans, but Democrats too. So you can't just say during this period we had a low unemployment rating, especially if Biden then also had a lower unemployment rating.
You're done here, all right? You're an emotional wreck. You're obsessed with Donald Trump. It's kind of sad to watch. Now,
what is that even? Is that in reaction to being asked to answer the question and not to go on his spiel? It's to whine. Like, how dare you ask me that question? You're offended. You're liberal. You offended liberal. Liberal offended liberal. Liberal offended liberal.
now, here's the thing. Under Donald Trump, you had 3.5% unemployment. You had one of the best economies we've had in
Biden had lower unemployment ratings. Biden had either comparable or lower unemployment ratings, including for the black community, which was a statistic that I heard Trump repeat all the time, the lowest black unemployment. Heard it again and again and again. If this is something you can cite for Trump and his magnificent economy, but the last 4 years shows the terror of Harris, then why would this data be comparable?
decades. When Biden finally got control, our real GDP was back to pre-pandemic levels. They had inherited an economy that was well on its way to actually recovering. That's why they got all of the job growth that they did. The other thing that you like to point out was that, okay,
So he's saying that like Trump recovered the economy, not Biden. Then the economy crashed under Trump, and then they quickly fixed it, handed it back to Biden, and then Biden carried it out. See, the story is always the same. The story is always, my story is that Trump picked up a good post-Obama economy and carried it off, did massive deficit spending with tax cuts, and of course, big deficit spending creates growth. Maybe it's not fiscally responsible. Maybe it doesn't plan for the future, but it creates short-term growth. And then the economy crashes, and his story then picks up then, and then Trump fixes it, hands it over to Biden, and then Biden takes Trump's economy. But it's not from the Democrat perspective, which is Trump mismanaged COVID, the economy crashed, the economy was then handed over to Biden, then they had to pass multiple stimulus packages, which then recovered the economy and allowed us to have larger growth and a better economy than every other single other G7 nation. No, that was done by Trump too. And this reminds me of when Trump claims Biden's black unemployment numbers, because at one point Biden got lower black unemployment than Trump. And so instead of Trump just saying, I used to have the lowest black unemployment numbers, he just started citing Biden's numbers and saying that he created the economy, so it was his numbers anyway.
Donald Trump has way more deficit spending than the Biden-Harris administration. Well, what you actually have to objectively look at is two things. The 2 years when Trump had Republican control of both the Senate and the House, and 2 years when Biden had Democrat control of the Senate and the House. And guess what we find? Deficit spending under Democrats was nearly 3 times as high than Trump's. And they can't blame COVID for that. And what they instead did was put more bills into place, like the Inflation Reduction Act, which, ironically increased inflation massively, and the American Rescue Plan. Both giant
I don't think the congressional offices have found that it increased inflation massively.
Fair.
I don't know where he's getting that from. Also, again, Trump had a bigger deficit than Biden. It's just a fact. He's just trying to be like, well, if you look at this specific portion, if you only look at the 2 years here, but stop. You know what this sounds like to me? It sounds like when Trump says, I have the most votes of any sitting president. Of any sitting president, but not of any president, huh? Who is the person who's got the most votes? Oh, it just so happens to be the person who we're running against? Wow, big surprise. As the population increases, so do the vote portions.
Giant welfare bills that increase demand without doing anything to increase supply, which of course creates inflation. You don't need an economics degree to know that, but apparently maybe you need to be educated on it. But keep obsessing over how to.
None of this had to do with tariffs. Remember that the original question was about tariffs? He was asking him, like, what do you think about Trump's 20% tariff? Which, again, is against the fundamental economic policy. You cannot be like, I need to educate you in the economy when you won't answer the question about tariffs.
Pronounce her name.
Do you see what happens there, though? You go back to what was happening in 2018 when Paul Ryan was the Speaker of the House. That's not what we're talking about. We're not in 2018 anymore. We're talking about Donald Trump's plans in 2024.
I'm going back to policies and outcomes.
Congressman, we're talking about Donald Trump's plans in 2024, which is a 20% across the board tariff that he said recently he could do without Congress, and he plans to do without Congress. So if you want to try to lecture me and say, oh, what about economics and supply and demand,
then I'll lecture,
what do you think would
on
happen?
some basic conservative principles.
Are you for a 20% tariff?
I'll lecture
That's
you on
his
some
policy.
basic conservative principles, since you claim to be.
Hey, we just asked the second time in a row about the 20% tariff. How much you want to bet he answers or talks about that question? And you're right. Actually, here's why a 20% tariff is cool now, or this is why I'm against it. And I condemn Trump on this.
A former conservative, so maybe you need some help remembering.
Yeah, I'm for free markets and free trade, not a 20% tariff.
Third time now he's asked about it.
This is what I'm getting at. There's nothing in conservative principles that says tariffs are necessarily a bad thing. Conservative principles.
Oh no, he can't actually be trying to defend it. No, don't reduce yourself to this. Don't drag yourself through the muck and the garbage and the dirt of isolationist nonsense economic policies just to defend that madman. Really? You're just gonna drop all your fucking principles? Against tariffs as a fundamental idea. Nobody said, are you in favor of any tariffs or no tariffs at all? Are you in favor of tariffs on strategic industries in order to protect American manufacturing for national defense priorities versus no tariffs whatsoever? The question was about a 20% tariff on everything that would not just be applied to industries that could flourish domestically in the United States, that maybe if we create a bubble, a market where we could have a 20% tariff introduced to try to make it so we can promote more domestic manufacturing because we can create a market opportunity, or we could be in an area where we really need short, supply lines to make sure that even in an economic crisis globally, we'd be able to continue to have short supply lines for food, or short supply lines for fuel, or short supply lines when it comes to microchip inputs for production. No, he is talking about a 20% tariff on everything, on food imports, on technological imports, on basic like toys and cars and everything. Everything gets a 20% tariff. This has nothing to do with protecting any specific industry. This is just a broad, sweeping sledgehammer economic policy, taking a sledgehammer to a type of economic tool that you use like a scalpel. You try to find a certain area where you want to create a bubble for your market for something that you need to produce domestically. You do not put a tariff on everything, or all you're going to do is making it so Americans have less money to spend on essential goods, and you've done nothing else. You haven't even protected the American. You haven't even promoted any like type of flourish. I mean, think about this for a second. 20% tariff on everything. It's not just going to affect the industries that we might be able to make domestic alternatives for. This is going to affect the industries that there's no domestic alternative for. That even if you had a 20, 30, or 40% tariff on it, due to a lack of domestic like labor knowledge, so we're talking about human capital,
Or a way
we're talking about or any other number of factors that maybe we just don't have the right inputs or materials, we cannot make those domestically. Meaning that the only way people would have to get these goods would be to trade for them overseas. But now every single good has a 20% tariff, meaning no matter what, those goods are going to cost more, and for no economic benefit. This is what happens when you take a tool that is supposed to be used begrudgingly, a tool that's supposed to be used in order to protect American national security priorities, and instead use it as just stupid economic populism in order to excite your base.
Tariffs are necessarily a bad thing. Conservative principles are a way to approach problems and assess trade-offs.
So can I just say,
government needs
tariffs are a bad thing. Tariffs are, period, for consumers, for the people who are consuming, they are a bad thing. For Americans, for the American people, they are a bad thing. They are a tax that is put on these imported goods that people are going to have to pay through that price being passed down to the consumer. Now, he can try to deny that now, and maybe he's going to, just throw himself into the economic populist dogma in order to serve that man. But that's the fact of it. And if he implements the policy, that is what will happen.
Revenue. There's a variety of ways to get that revenue. Every single...
you could say it's a good for the protection of one specific industry for national security reasons. But when it comes to the, like trying to help the American people, no, it's a burden you put on the American people. The question is, can you justify the burden? Like, yes, we are putting tariffs on this one good, but it's because we need to for XYZ thing for America. That's why. But if you just do it as a broad tool that applies to every single import, all you're doing is making it more expensive to live in just about every way.
Single tax that there is, whether it's an income tax or a property tax or a consumption tax, has some sort of distortionary effect, including tariffs. Now, throughout most of our country's history, to include since our founding, the primary revenue generator for the federal government was indeed tariffs. So it is not anti-conservatives to say that we should tax goods coming into the country necessarily. It is another way to gain government revenue. And a lot of people might prefer that.
I'm sorry, it will not be able to regenerate the money that Trump wants to make by tax cutting. And this is why economists broadly say that Trump's economic proposals will more than double the deficit increase rates of a potential Harris administration when you look at the policies she's putting forward. Now, maybe you think Harris will overspend, maybe you think Harris will go further, but Trump's policies, as what's proposed currently right now, not what he decides to do off the cuff, what's actually in there, is going to increase the national deficit more than the Biden-Harris one. Sorry, it just is what it is. And you're not going to be able to make up that revenue through tariffs. You're not. So not only are we going to be passing more of a cost down to consumers, we're also going to be spending more at the same time. It's just not, we just can't make that up. We just can't make that up with tariffs.
To increase, as opposed to increasing individual income taxes. Now, Donald Trump has a habit of saying something as a way to plant a negotiation flag, because you can say you're for free markets all day long, but you know who isn't? China. And so get your conservative principles right.
You're right. We need to add a 20% tariffs to imports from Denmark because of the Chinese, because the Chinese don't believe in free market. You said it, he said a 20% tariff on everything. He didn't say a 20% tariff on goods imported from China. He actually said it's a 20% tariff on everything, and the Chinese imports should be tariffed even more. So I don't even, 30%, 40%? What's the Chinese tariffs going to be compared to everything else? Why would we be placing a 20% tariff on goods from Canada or Ireland or Great Britain or Japan or South Korea or Sierra Leone or wherever the fuck if the issue is China? Just place the tariff on China.
We really believe is you have to have fair and free and open trade within our domestic economy, but you also have to have your eyes wide open and acknowledge that there's countries like China that will fight unfairly, and that you have to negotiate with them. And tariffs are a useful way to
let me jump in,
that.
chaps, because I've got to remind people I'm still here. On the 60 Minutes interview, Tim, that she did, I would just be concerned if I was a Democrat voter or leaning towards that way.
Is Paris not gonna? Sorry, I called his name Paris instead of Pierce. Is he not gonna ask him at all about any of that tariff stuff? Like, he dodged the tariff question for like half an hour. Well, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 minutes. And then when he finally gets to answering it, he answers like tariffs sometimes are good in principle. This would be like, hey, I want to pass a new law to make it so that if you drink beer, you go to prison. I'm bringing back prohibition. And then someone who responds to that, like, say, Dylan, this is absurd. This is a government overreach. This is somebody's personal health decision. It's not a decision of the federal government. Do you really think that people should institute laws to restrict alcohol consumption? And then I respond like, yeah, I believe there should be laws. That doesn't answer the question at all. It's just another way of dodging the question. He didn't answer 20% tariff on all goods. He answered the idea that a tariff should exist in some circumstances at some time.
I'm very concerned about how she answers questions about the economy. She had no answer. I mean, that was an excruciating exchange.
Why 20%? I mean, at that point, like, why not 30%? Why not 35%? We're just throwing random numbers out there.
And rightly got the mockery it deserved. And that's my issue with Kamala Harris. It's not that she's not intelligent. She obviously is. She's done extremely well with her life as a lawyer, senator, and so on. It's not that she, isn't personable. And it's not that I don't share her vision that we'd all love to feel more joyful. It's how are we going to get to this utopia? And she has single-handedly, throughout all of these exchanges, declined or doesn't know how we're going to get to utopia. Does that not concern you?
Is that her pitch? I mean, if this was Bernie and he was saying, like, how do you pay for it? He's like, I don't know, who cares? We're healthcare. Then I'd be like, okay, well, maybe you got a point here. But she's not, like, pitching utopia. What's utopia? The bringing back the tax credit for the children? Is it what's her utopia? I want to see the progressive policies that she's proposing. I mean, she's abandoned Medicare for all. She's reversed her position on fracking. She's with Biden as presumably on the amount of permits that are being issued for federal lands to drill. Like, what is the utopia? Like, it just seems like a standard Democrat campaign, really.
Yeah, no, because we're not getting to utopia. We need somebody to run and manage the government. Okay, Piers? And so on this question of how she's going to pay for her plans, there isn't a good answer, so she didn't give one. I agree with that. I'm a fiscal conservative. I wish that they would be balancing the budget. But here's the thing. She's running against Donald Trump, whose answer to that question is even more incoherent. Despite Dan's attempt at a history lesson over there, what Donald Trump said was how he was going to pay for his plans was that he was going to tariff China, and we were going to use the tariff money as if it's like a government fee, like we're getting this fee, and that he's going to pay for free healthcare, he's going to pay for childcare, he's going to pay for everything with these magical tariffs. Like, he has no coherent answer on this. And here's the other thing. What is
No, he's not gonna pay. It's not that he's gonna pay for all that. He's just not gonna pay. He's just not gonna pay. There's gonna be no payment, and then you let the deficit just balloon up. But don't worry, world reserve currency. This can't bite us back ever.
Not good for the economy.
It'll just go. It's just a number. It's just kind of like a score. Actually, if you get the highest score, you're the winner.
Economy is instability, and Donald Trump is an absolute wreck of a human. We have no idea what he would do in a second term. When he left office, there was a mob of people storming the Capitol, trying to attack Congressman Crenshaw. That's what was happening. They were waving his flag. They were storming the Capitol. They were trying to keep him in power. I'm sorry. Just let me finish this. Let me finish this.
It's such a strange thing to say.
Let me finish this. No, I'm sorry. This is what happened at the end of his term. And even his own supporters were like, we are concerned that he can't stay in another 14 days. They talked about the 25th Amendment. Dan Crenshaw at the time said that he was on the side of the rioters, that the president was on the side of the rioters. That's what he said. And now, because of that, his own vice president, his own chief of staff, it's not me, it's not somebody that is obsessed with Trump, his own Department of Transportation, Secretary of Defense, all of these people can't support him again because they don't know what he's going to do, because he's so erratic, because he's of such low character. We can't put somebody like that in. That is dangerous for the country, for our democracy, but also for the economy.
But we have to go back to what you said. You've got to go back to what you said about the economy and not knowing what he's going to do. That's nonsense. We know exactly what he's going to do because he led the country for 4 years.
You don't want to talk about it.
Well, I want to talk about what actually matters to people, and if you actually poll people and talk to regular people, what matters to them is the economy. What matters to them is immigration.
Why did you guys
for you to say that we have no idea where
Democracy also polls pretty high up there too. So I guess those voters are just stupid for trying to care about the continuation of the republic. What we should care about instead is Trump's brilliant 20% tariff on all goods.
we have no idea what Donald Trump's going to do in the next 4 years. Of course we have an idea, because he governed for 4 years. And you know what he did?
No, it's
a really
totally
good job with the
people,
economy.
Congressman.
And I realize that you don't know that, but like 60-70% of Americans do know that.
Congressman,
and so it's for you to say we just have no idea. It's all going to be all over the place. That's nonsense. We know exactly what he's going to do.
It will. Congressman, the people that were that were running the government with him last time don't support him again. Most of his cabinet doesn't support him. He has a new vice president. In the box at the RNC convention, okay, in the presidential nominees box, it wasn't Dan Crenshaw. It wasn't Pence. The people around him was Tucker Carlson.
Since you know so well.
What's that?
So which policies are changing?
What was the question?
Which policies are changing?
Well,
The tariff, I mean, the question, okay, let's go back to the tariffs, the thing you wouldn't talk about. That's something that's changed. That's different. He's talked about tariffs before, but a 20% tariff on all goods being treated as the same as an individual. What Trump is talking about is a redefinition of the basis of American trade. Is that a trade is not, America's not trading because trade in and of itself brings about prosperity, which is like the free trade position. Trade is a mechanism by which to fund the government by tariffing goods. Even if we pass those costs down to consumers, you know, it is what it is. Right? This is I mean, if we're the center of world trade, do we not see how this could be, you know, an issue now? Because, you know, America in 1880 is a little different than America in 2024, if you want to talk about old style tariff policy.
For example,
is it going to be? Let me guess. It's going to be lower regulations and lower taxes, just like Republicans.
Well, you know what's actually very interesting.
Pretty much what our economic policies
let me
are.
jump
He's
in
not
there.
running on that.
Hang on.
Wait, I'm sorry. He asked him in response. Tim didn't get to finish. He didn't get to finish his classification of like why it's going to be different because there's different people. You want to know why it's going to be different? Rex Tillerson's gone. Okay. You've got John Bolton. He's gone. You've got Mike Pence. He's gone. You've got a bunch of different economic advisors, different like attorney generals, different people. All these people are gone, right? He's going in there this time with like off the idea of don't worry, we got rid of all the rhinos that produced the economic conditions last time. Not only, we've said before, again, Trump pretending the economy comes down to the president every time is silly. But the ones that did produce part of the Trump's economy, they're all gone. Don't worry, we got 2 years in office, J.D. Vance, the venture capitalist. He's vice president of the United States. We're talking about bringing back Michael Flynn on the campaign trail, found guilty, who was communicating with foreign governments before we even got it. Yeah, we're bringing him back into the administration. We hear about the reabsorption of all these early era Trump sycophants that were boxed out because they were too extreme. as well as the incorporation of new sycophants. And if there was more traditional economic conservatives who agreed with the first 2 years of Trump economic policy, then they would not be proposing the 20% tariff. Dan Crenshaw was certainly not the person telling Trump, please, we need to tariff everything. If we tariff everything, then the economy will take off. That wasn't something Dan Crenshaw would say, because Dan Crenshaw knows that's not true, which is why he's avoiding the topic.
Hang on. Let me jump in. I want to play a clip.
He's not running on that, Dan. Wake up to what the party
Tim.
is
Let me
now.
respond.
He had Tucker.
Tim, that's what I'm
Wake up to what the party is now.
Hang on, let me
I'm sorry. Piers likes to. Look, I understand it's his show and he gives opinions and such, but I always have just found it. The problem with moderating debates while also injecting yourself into the debate is that you have the power here. And so this is a moment where Tim should be able to respond, because number one, he didn't get to finish his point about why it changed. And while he was trying to finish his point, Dan then followed up with another question. And then before he got to answer the question or finish his point, Piers is now going to be like, I have something to say to change the topic. And he's the moderator, so he can. And there's nothing he can really do about it. So Tim is just in the air, fucked, and there's nothing he can say. Like, it's...
Sorry,
this is part of the reason why I do my best when I moderate not to involve myself in the debate.
I'm moderating this, chaps.
Cutting 3 regulations.
I am
for
here.
everyone.
I want to play a clip. This is from her appearance on Colbert. And the reason I'm playing it, it plays into what you're both talking about here. Because the key determination for people is going to be, well, is she responsible for everything that Joe Biden has done? Were they a team? And is everything on her shoulders now that would have been on Biden's on this ticket? And if not, is there any point of difference? Here's what she told Colbert when he asked her that question.
Under a Harris administration, what would the major changes be, and what would stay the same?
Frankly, I love the American people, and I believe in our country. I love that it is our character and nature to be an ambitious people. You know, we have aspirations, we have dreams, we have incredible work ethic, and I just believe that we can create and build upon the success we've achieved in a way that we continue to grow opportunity, and in that way grow the strength of our nation. So, for example, my economic policies, I think of it, and I've named it as...
Okay, if you guys are curious why this is a word salad, because this is a word salad. She is not going to undercut Biden. There's no way she's going to undercut Biden with a month left before the election. He is negotiating the stuff in the Middle East. He's dealing with all the foreign policy stuff. She's on the campaign trail. She doesn't want to undermine him after Biden chose her to be VP and then chose her to be anointed president of the United States if she wins. Is she going to undercut that guy? Of course not. It's her strongest political ally. There's no way she's going to do that.
Is creating an opportunity economy. So it's about things like investing in small businesses. I love our small businesses.
And even if she was, what would she say? What would be the thing that she would differentiate herself on Biden with? I mean, for me, like, I would be like, well, I'm much more in favor of ending the drug war. Or like, there's stuff like, you know, I would be maybe more on board with and be like, we need to reclassify the drug war into a drug peacekeeping mission. I don't know. But she doesn't want to do that. She doesn't want to undercut Biden. And if she attacks Biden's record, or like if she's different on Biden than something, then that implies that she thinks that he did bad on this. And to say that could be read as an attack. I mean, even when like Trump is like seen like shaking the hand of Ron DeSantis, I see Trumpers repost it like, oh my God, Biden so clearly hates Kamala Harris. That's why he picked her to be the nominee, I guess. And so this is just another example of him attack. So she doesn't want to give any ammunition. That's what I see it as. Does that mean it's an honest answer? Does that mean it doesn't make it not word salad? No, I still want her to differentiate herself from Biden, but she probably feels restricted from doing so if she could.
Went on, Dan, on The View, and when they asked a similar question, she was not...
Hey, did I get a Matt Binder raid? Oh my goodness. Hello, Matt Binders. Matt Binderers? Matty boys? I don't know what they call Matt Binder fans. We're watching Dan Crenshaw debate a never-Trumper in Mr. Tim Miller here, former staffer on the Jeb Bush campaign, over Trump versus Harris, and I am baffled. I am baffled. I am befuddled, and my brain is muddled. Welcome, Matt Binderers.
Not able to articulate a single thing in which she would do differently if it was down to her. So she's wedded completely to everything that Joe Biden did as president. That seems a very...
I mean, like, let me think of the major issues where she should break from. Okay, so I've already said I think it's political allegiance. Biden's rewarded her for loyalty pretty strongly, and now she's continuing to show that loyalty. I think that's definitely part of it. She doesn't want to undercut Biden, and if she attacks Biden on something and says, I'm different, or if she even says, I'm different than Biden, it will be read as an attack, and it'll be used as an attack, and then Biden will be asked about it, then Biden will have to respond, and then it causes a spiral a month out from the election. That's probably part of the reason. If I was to pick an area where I would want Harris to differentiate herself on, labor is probably an area where Biden's stronger, so it'd be an area where she could like take a lot of pride in. But for example, I think that she could go stronger on things like a public option to single payer, but she's backed off of that. She doesn't want to offer a bold new plan on that. She doesn't want to come off as radical. She doesn't want to be the same Bernie follower that she was in 2020 when it comes to the policy side of that. So I guess she doesn't want to do that. Israel is like one obvious option you could point towards, but considering that still a plurality of Americans sympathize with Israel more, or they'll choose both. Like for the ones that sympathize with Palestine, I think it's 19% of the population. She might just be of the opinion that pissing off the much larger voting pool of American Jews in places like Pennsylvania and otherwise, it's not worth it. Biden's currently trying to stop the Israelis from striking Iranian nuclear facilities and oil export terminals, and she doesn't want to undercut that effort. She probably hasn't been as involved that Biden has been, so she might not be as knowledgeable. She might not feel comfortable talking about it, as well as it's just a big political risk. It's a big political risk she probably doesn't want to take, and that's assuming she even disagrees with Biden. Point is, there's no way to win when attacking Joe Biden as your Harris. There's no way to win on attacking him, for not only because it'll look like an attack if you just say you're differentiating yourself from Biden on this. There's always going to be an L on some area. The question is taking that L for the Democrats, putting that L on Joe Biden, and making it so that she's distancing herself in that way explicitly, is the upside on any specific issue so great that it would be worth it for the election, even if it pisses off Biden? I think there might be some areas where that might be the case. And I mean this honestly. I don't think Israel's one of them. I don't think the polling makes sense. I think it could definitely satisfy part of the Democratic base more, but they're viciously going for those votes in Pennsylvania. And they are terrified of losing the Jewish vote, which Democrats still largely maintain. And so I don't think that would be the issue. For me, it would be stuff like the legalization of marijuana. If there's anybody that could sell ending the drug war, I would want it to be a prosecutor, to use that bully pulpit and say, I'm a prosecutor. I'm sick of wasting police resources, locking up people who are sick, not criminals. You know, something like along those lines. But I don't think she wants to take those risks. I don't think her campaign wants to take those risks. And so instead, we got standard Democrat McGee.
Very risky strategy to me, given how unpopular Biden was before he pulled out.
She doesn't say at all how.
What do you think about Harris saying she'll have a Republican in her cabinet? I think it's fine. I see some people get angry about it, but like if she's trying to win a group of voters and she has like I don't know, fucking Liz Cheney in her cabinet, but she doesn't do anything. She's just like there for like a unity position. Like I don't really. If she gave Liz Cheney influence instead of just like here's a thing for the unity of the country or whatever, obviously I'd have a much different opinion. But if it's a campaign strategy, then like, yes, it is what it is. I just can't think of any Republican that I could possibly name that I think giving actual influence to any administration would be smart. Would it come to labor? No. I think the NLRB would be terrible, led by any Republican I could think of. Well, would it be healthcare? No. Would it be healthcare? Would it be law enforcement? No. Would it be law enforcement? So it would just have to be some basic like check or balance or like continuation of the Republic, Constitution, something like that. So I'm not against it as long as it's You're not like abandoning policy positions just so you can get Liz Cheney's endorsement, which is getting you marginal votes anyway.
Strategy to me, given how unpopular Biden was before he pulled out.
She doesn't say at all how any of her policies would actually help small businesses. I talk to small business owners all the time.
I could see they're like picking like someone like Kinzinger to be on like the Helsinki Commission. I don't know.
The one thing they need more than anything else is less regulation, easier to permit, less taxes. They need it to be easier to create a business. Republican policies do that. And you have to associate the policies with.
She could distance herself with Biden on student loan forgiveness? Honestly, I don't think so. Because the problem is, on one hand, she's already claimed the victories of student loan forgiveness. And so, like, the one for the student loans that were forgiven. So if she now distances herself, is she rejecting those victories? Because you can't both claim the victories and then distance yourselves from the failures. You can try to, but it's not easy.
Is less regulation, easier to permit, less taxes. They need it to be easier to create a business. Republican policy.
So which is why I think like the middle ground she's found is like, yes, it's good we canceled student loans, but we've just got it started. This is just the beginning, seems to be the pitch.
Do that. And you have to associate the policies with outcomes before you lay any blame or before you give any credit. She can't even articulate what she's even talking about. Nobody knows what her economic policy is based on these answers. And in the end, it's what we actually want is what we got under Donald Trump. I mean, under Donald Trump, you actually had wage growth, and the lowest quintile of earners had 16% wage growth. Under Biden and Harris, 0%, because
I will say one thing, like, of course, Harris was not my first pick for president. One thing I will say that Biden's always been good on, and it's part of the reason why I was like not completely bummed out about the idea of a Biden presidency versus an Obama presidency, is because Biden's always been a boy with labor. At least the general aesthetic of it, he's always leaned into it. And his NLRB has been really good and much better than the Trump NLRB. The National Labor Relations Board is much more interactive with unions. I remember when I was interning at SEIU 1199, which is a local healthcare workers union in the DC area. This is when the DC hospitals were shutting down in wards 8 and 9 in the areas where you're getting the most gun violence, the areas where you would need trauma centers and they don't have them anymore. They're shutting them down and laying off all these employees. That's when I was working with them. So it was a very hectic time. But as they were trying to deal with these issues, the Trump NLRB was like nowhere to be seen. There was no way to get support from them because it was one of those like classic moves where if you don't believe in a government organization, you simply appoint somebody to head it who also doesn't believe in said organization. And so they run it as if it wasn't even in existence at all. And then when it's ran like it doesn't even exist at all, then people question why it exists in the first place. Might as well get rid of it as a waste of money.
Wage growth didn't outpace inflation. Inflation was created by too much government spending. Do not take my word for that. You can look at the Fed minutes and their assessment of it under a Biden administration, by the way. And what happened was when you add too much money into the economy, which is in the form of welfare or in the form of corporate cronyism under the IRA with hundreds of billions of dollars spent that's going to NGOs and nonprofits and venture capitalists that are then going to green renewable energy, what are you going to get? You're going to get massive inflation just like we got under Biden and Harris. That's what people are going to remember. And we can actually associate those outcomes with the policies that they implemented.
All right, Tim, surely, Tim, you must recoil a bit when you see the way she responds to those kind of questions. I mean, she literally says nothing. It's
I don't.
It's just blather.
I don't because this is the thing. You guys don't want to show Donald Trump's answers because they're.
What do people mean by like what does he mean by recoil a bit? Like, okay, this is a better answer question. Do you roll your eyes? Yes, I roll my eyes. Of course, I roll my eyes when I hear some of like the joy and the like certain answers to the question. But they're saying this like as if like Harris has shown like a stunning level of political naivete and lack of knowledge on the issues. I mean, she hasn't like knocked it out of the park and shown herself to be exceptional. But if you like recoil, I don't have the ability to recoil. I've been numb to that. I've been numb to it ever since Sharpiegate, okay? The idea of recoiling because they want to get into specifics of the policy. I mean, ask Trump about his economic policy for young people, and he's just going to rant about the cartels for 8 minutes. Ask Trump about how he's going to bring manufacturing back to the United States, and I mean, he's just going to like talk about his 20% tariffs, which is actually going to make it harder for a lot of these manufacturers to get the inputs necessary from overseas to run these factories at a profit and employ people. I mean, it's like there is no like clear-cut economic policies being produced by Trump when he's speaking in a flowing back and forth interview with staff or with some interviewer. You might be able to get it on a policy sheet or a policy proposal, but he is not somebody to give clear-cut like policy answers when asked about something. He is a man that will answer the question that he wish was asked of him, and then pivot to where he is strongest.
I don't, because this is the thing. You guys don't want to
Just look at any of his economic, like his time at the Detroit Economic Summit, his time getting grilled by other economists during previous interviews. I mean, it's really the starkest when he's trying to talk about the economy, which is strange when you consider how he pulls on the economy. But of course, perception.
I don't. It's just blather. I don't, because this is the thing. You guys don't want to show Donald Trump's answers because they're even more word salad. It's lies and it's conspiracies and it's dangerous. And like, that's why we're not showing his interviews where he's lying about what's happening with Hurricane Helene right now, or the debate where Kamala mopped the floor with him. Here's the thing. Congressman Crenshaw wants your audience to think that the Republican Party right now is the same as it was in 2017, and that the Donald Trump administration will be the same as it was when he brought in a bunch of traditional Republicans to be around him in his cabinet and to work in his staff. And I'm sorry, that's just an imaginary world that the congressman wants to live in to feel comfortable. Because what the world we live in now is all of those people are, no, I'm sorry, Piers, let me finish. All of those people are gone now. And at the RNC at the box, the people around Trump are Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Tucker Carlson. Tucker had a prominent spot to speak at the convention. Congressman Crenshaw did not. This new party is a native.
Wasn't just Tucker Carlson, by the way. It was Viktor Orban, too. Hey, he's going to take on the swamp. He's going to take on the corrupt establishment. I know. Let's bring on the man from the European Union who's most notorious for the misappropriation of EU funds and corruption, leading the country that is widely recognized as the most corrupt country in the European Union. And it's not like you can pin it on anyone else. The Fidesz party has ruled Hungary for quite a bit now. Okay? So, it's a little different. This is not, it's not Reagan's party. Not that you should vote for Reagan's party either, but this is not Reagan's party.
Nativist party that's going to be about mass deportations and tariffs and revenge on Donald Trump's enemies. If you don't believe me, listen to what Donald Trump says. And I just want to know why Congressman Crenshaw thinks that he understands where the party is better than Trump's own vice president, Mike Pence, who assesses this and says, no, this is not someone we can trust. Why does Congressman Crenshaw think that he knows better than Mike Pence about Donald Trump's character and what kind of policies he would put in place?
Dan, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, so I'll just remind everybody that we're about to vote in November. And on your ballot, it doesn't ask you the question of whether Donald Trump is the same as Jesus Christ. That's not what the question is.
I hate this defense. I keep hearing this every time. I've heard different variations of this defense, like, oh, well, Trump isn't perfect. Nobody's saying Trump is perfect. He's saying that Trump does not match with the economic philosophy of the Republican right that they've been pushing for years when it comes to tariffs. When it comes to, we're constitutional conservatives. Yes, we'll vote for the man who called for the suspension of the U.S. Constitution so he could be reinstalled as president of the United States. It is betting everything and anything on the checks and balances that are in place, hoping that Trump will not be able to barrel over them this time with better planning, surrounded by more sycophants, and with one of those checks actively clicked down because Mike Pence is gone and the sycophant Vance is in.
The question is, do you prefer Donald Trump or do you prefer Kamala Harris? And so any reasonable and objective person is going to look at that question and they're going to say, well, okay, well, what things matter to me? Do I want better immigration policy? Do I want my border to actually have law and order around it? Do I want my cities to be safe? Do I want a peace through strength type of foreign policy? Do I want Abraham Accords or do I want...
What does that even mean? I want my cities to be safe. From what? Crime? Crime's down. Crime was, in fact, crime actually, I think there was higher crime rates during the Trump administration. We'd have to go back and check the crime rates, but I don't know what you mean by safe. The cities are safer from what? Drug overdoses are coming down. Like, is that safer? Or like, what's safety in a city? I mean, I mean, again, it's broad, it's very vague, so I don't really know like where to like grab this onto, which is kind of like the strength of the statement.
I want October.
Oh, also like a peace through strength foreign policy. I mean, come on. Do we really need to get into it?
7th.
These guys can't answer this.
Do I
This
want
is
a better
crazy.
economy with less regulations? Do I want my oil and gas industry to be pummeled by
We need less regulations. Let's put a tariff on everything. Like, come on.
regulation after regulation, or do I want my electricity prices to go back down? That's the question. And that's the question that people are going to be
That's a
answering.
damning
And by the way,
non-answer, to borrow a phrase. Congressman, that's a damning
mass
non-answer.
deportations, a vast majority, that's not a non-answer. I'm the only one actually giving facts
It is
here.
a non-answer.
The
Why do you
mass
know better than Mike
deportation
Pence?
is broadly
Why can you assess-
supported.
See, the question was why, like Mike Pence and all these former Trumpers don't trust Trump. They don't think he's safe. They don't think he can be trusted with responsibility. And his response is, but the economy. But the economy. You know what this is starting to sound like to me? And I don't mean to be hyperbolic, but when I listen to like Russians try to justify the system, when they're like, well, you know, the freedom of expression is, and this is, but it's not the 90s anymore. We got stability. If you were truly somebody who values republicanism, if you, as in like the republic, not as in like being a Republican, if you're truly somebody who values freedom of expression, if you're truly somebody who values these things, you cannot just like hand wave the foundations of the republic by saying economic policy, and then also in the same breath defend terrible economic proposals like tariffs.
Supported by the American people, including Hispanics.
Why shouldn't we listen to Donald Trump's vice
So ask the
president and his
question a
chief of
different way,
staff?
then, Tim.
Why shouldn't we listen
Ask
to Mike?
them. I'm not here. I'm not here to answer for them. I'm here
Doesn't
to
it-
answer
doesn't
for
it
me.
alarm
And
you?
I'm here
Doesn't
to
that
lay this
alarm
out
you?
very simply.
You don't
very
feel at
simply
all
for the American
alarmed that
people
the-
and what the choices are.
Dan, you're not at all alarmed that the
The only
last
thing that alarms
administration
me is your
ended with people
high-pitched,
storming the
shrieking
Capitol.
voice.
Let me.
Yeah, you know what happened. You know what happened after that? Because I was there. You know what happened after that? A few hours later, we did our jobs and we got back to business. You know what happened? A few weeks later, Donald Trump moved out of the White House without a word. He
That's
didn't.
not
He didn't
true.
move out of the White House.
Well, no,
He did?
it's not true
Okay,
because
so
for
he's still living
starters, you
there?
didn't
Am
go
I
back.
confused or are you confused?
Who's shrieking now? For starters, you didn't go back
Not
to
me.
business. There were votes to overturn the election, and as you said, your colleague Ted Cruz of
a few
Texas
hours
was
later we did,
voted on
yes.
the side of the rioters. And then Donald Trump didn't go to the inauguration for the first time in history. He went home like a petulant child. I want to read something that Dan Crenshaw wrote. Here's Dan.
Okay,
A
so you're
culture
mad that he
characterized by
didn't go to the
self-pity.
inauguration. That's what it is.
He didn't. We didn't have a peaceful transfer of power. He didn't. In every other transition before this, the outgoing president,
talking
their
about?
team invites the incoming team in.
Okay, so
this
wait,
is what we do in a
wait,
normal
So let
democracy.
me just get this straight.
Rioters. And then Donald Trump didn't go to the inauguration for the first time in history. He went home like a petulant child.
Inauguration. That's what it is.
He didn't. We didn't have a peaceful transfer of power. He didn't. In every other transition before this, the outgoing president,
talking
their
about?
team invites the incoming team in.
Okay, so
this
wait,
is what we do in a normal
So
democracy.
let me just get this straight. Because he didn't sit there in January and watch President Biden get inaugurated.
Dan. Because
that's not a
sat
peaceful
in-
transition of power. That is such an absurd statement to make. But go ahead.
Okay, Dan,
read
what
the quote.
about-
I'm
okay,
glad you're reading
fine.
quotes from my book. I appreciate it. Go ahead.
Dan, fine. Then that's not the sitting there that I care about. How about when he sat there off the Oval Office for hours watching TV while a mob of people carrying his flag attacked police officers and stormed the Capitol? The President of the United States was not on the side of the Capitol Police.
Can I just say, like, the way that we talk about this undersells it. I hate to be the hyperbolic, like, the violence on January 6th and the delay of the vote, due to his inaction, to me, just seems like part and parcel of the strategy to try to overturn the election. I mean, if you're there for like 3 hours watching the stuff unfold on TV, mind you, the thing that people are rioting about is the lie that you and your team created. The people are at the Capitol because they believe that the democracy is about to die, that Joe Biden is going to be made king. They're about to steal the election from the rightful owner. They're going to give it to the person who doesn't own it. And then they're going to institute, like Democrats, crazy communism. And then America's going to be, or some version of just immense destruction will be thrown into the United States because of, you know, how Trump sold what a Biden presidency would be like at the time. But the main idea was democracy was dying. And we're in a country that believes, you know, every once in a while, the tree of liberty needs to be watered by the blood of tyrants. And if the government is making the tyrannical decision to steal an election and give it to the wrong candidate, violence seems like a reasonable solution. See, in most instances, it wouldn't be. But in the rare instance that our democracy is actually dying, a brave small group of patriots taking violent action to save it could be endorsed. At least I think it'd be much easier to endorse it. And so after them ramping them up and convincing them that the election was stolen, at the same time, they had people go to different states and make fake slants of electors, fake lists of them, so they could claim to be the elector, so Trump would have the ability to send these claims back down to the state level instead of the federal level if he could get Mike Pence's approval. So then the state governments, which were majority controlled by Republicans, could decide who the next president would be instead of the federal election system, instead of the system that we've been basing this on forever and we've always done. He wanted to send it back down. And in order to achieve that, they needed Mike Pence to stop the certification of the vote and send it back to the states. He didn't have the constitutional authority to be doing what they were asking of him, but they needed him to do that. And they needed the election certification to be delayed so they had the time to send it back down to the states to prepare their case. And after the rioters stormed the Capitol, the result was delayed. And while it was being delayed, Rudy Giuliani and the rest of Trump's sycophants were calling the Capitol and trying to get people like Mike Johnson and others to overturn the election results, which they attempted to do and failed. So when people say, oh, he walked out, you're leaving out the context of the fact that he did everything he could not to walk away, and only walked away when he had no other option outside of being taken out of the White House in handcuffs. So yes, you can say he walked away, but he walked away after doing everything possible not to respect the votes of everyday people and to literally throw them out. And if he would have sent it back to the state levels and disregarded it because of his fraudulent slate of electors, he would have been disregarding the votes of the American people for the fake votes that they fraudulently wrote up. It would be election fraud on a scale we have never seen in the United States before.
Out there and watched his DVR, and he ate his well-done hamburgers and did nothing. He did nothing for the Capitol Police that stood there because he was rooting for them to lose. That is not a peaceful transfer of power. That is Donald Trump's behavior that is unacceptable. And honestly, if anybody else in American public life was running against him, I would be for them, including you, including Nikki Haley, who I voted for, including almost all of the elected Democrats.
All right, listen.
That was unacceptable behavior, Dan. That was unacceptable behavior. Do you think
many people would agree with? I thought that was unacceptable behavior, but let's move forward to
you, Congressman. Congressman, was that unacceptable behavior for you?
I don't need to answer these questions again. I did an entire podcast calling it.
What is that answer? What if this is how? You want to ask? You asked me about my economic policy. Don't you know I have a podcast on this? Go listen to my podcast. Okay, go listen to my 1 hour pussyfoot around. Okay, go listen to my podcast. But you're on a show. We're not on your podcast. Just say yes or no. Okay. I don't need to answer this. I answered this on a different occasion, like 3 years ago.
What it was. At the moment I was calling it what it was.
I want to move anyway, Tim. I want to move to where we are.
Talk to somebody else if you want to get.
Are we really taking this answer from it? Like, oh, I said talking about all my podcast. Just say yes or no, or just say yeah, it was gross, but Harris is the threatened democracy in XYZ way, or XYZ reason is why it's not big enough of an issue, or say it isn't an issue and argue why it isn't an issue, which I know is not Dan Crenshaw's position, but you're a month out from the election and he doesn't want to talk about it.
Today, I want to ask Dan about this. This is where Kamala Harris appeared on the Call Her Daddy podcast and talked about female reproductive rights. Take a look at this.
Here's the thing is that you don't have to abandon your faith or deeply held beliefs to agree The government shouldn't be telling her what to do. If she chooses, she'll talk to her priest, her pastor, her rabbi, her imam, but not the government telling you what to do. And that's what's so outrageous about it, is a bunch of these guys up in these state capitals are writing these decisions because they somehow have decided that they're in a better position to tell you what's in your best interest than you are to know what's in your own best interest.
There's no doubt, Dan, that Trump is doing much better this time in 2020 with African Americans, with Latinos, with working class men. But I can imagine quite a few women listening to Kamala Harris talking about stuff like that in the way she talks about it and thinking, yeah, I could vote for that person. I could vote for a first female president. Do you think that is an Achilles heel for Trump in this campaign?
I mean, that's always been a demographic that Republicans, fail to sweep, of course, as younger women, and abortion tends to be one of the issues that comes first and foremost
fail
to
to
their minds.
sweep is one way to talk about how Republicans perform with women. Okay, fail to sweep young women. Okay.
Women and abortion tends to be one of the issues that comes first and foremost to them.
Yeah, the Germans failed to sweep through Moscow. That's one way you could describe it. Yeah.
Minds. It doesn't mean we're going to change our position on it. I mean, I can argue all day for the pro-life position. I would argue all day that what Kamala Harris is doing is spinning the issue in a very, very
in my mind, if someone says fail to sweep, it's like, oh, we got 55% instead of the 70% we should have gotten. Not, you performed way under the bar.
You all day that what Kamala Harris is doing is spinning the issue in a very, very dishonest way. We're not talking about somebody's body. We're not talking about doing what you want to do with your body, unless your body magically suddenly has two different heartbeats and
what is this? I'm sorry. It is also their body. Guess where the fetus is? It's in their stomach. Where's your stomach located? On your body. Happy we could have this basic biology lesson. Happy to talk with. What is this? It's not your body. It's technically it's in your body. You cannot convince a woman that a fetus is not in their body. Maybe this is why you're performing bad with women. You don't even know how the biology works. So how are you going to make the policy? See, this is why you don't get people who don't know about guns to make gun policy, right? Which is why I probably would not trust a lot of maybe, let's just say coastal Californians to design what the future is with our ownership of the AR-15. I also am not going to trust the person who doesn't know about how maybe a baby where it comes from or how it is produced to design, reproductive health care policy.
More toes. We're not talking about your body. We're talking about a separate body. And so there's a human element to this. That's the argument I'll always make about why I'm pro-life. And I think Americans largely agree with that. 60-70%.
Did you just say the uterus is in the stomach? Come on, you know what I mean. In the belly, in the stomach. This is in terminology usually referred to stomach. If somebody got shot here and it went into the uterus, people want to say, oh, it hit the uterus. It'd be, oh, you hit their stomach and then it entered and went through the uterus. Whatever, okay. Sure, no men know about women's biology, okay? A woman sits on an egg for 9 months and then it pops out and then it opens and then a child comes out at the age of 12 out of the egg.
There shouldn't even be abortions after 12 weeks. Ours is one of the only developed Western countries with abortion laws that go well past that. And, we need to have a better discussion about that as Americans and stop gaslighting people. Stop with these dishonest descriptions of what abortion actually is. It is killing a baby. It is taking a human life. And it's as simple as that. Now, as far as the politics of it go, they are what they are. Trump has done his best to navigate that by saying it's a state's issue. To be fair, that's what Republicans have been saying as we have sought to overturn Roe v. Wade, so that it can actually be a democratically held decision by the states. And that's exactly what's happening right now.
Tim, the thing I have a problem with the way Kamala Harris and Tim Walz have come at this is they keep perpetuating the myth that Trump is advocating for a federal abortion ban. He's not. It's unbelievably disingenuous.
Can we also say that there's a difference between advocating and would allow? For example, for a while, Trump wouldn't answer till very recently, as the election's gotten closer and he hasn't come ahead, that he wouldn't answer directly the question of whether he would veto a national abortion ban, which I think is the real question. because it's not like he's going to executive order abortion is banned. It has to be proposed as a bill, and then it comes to his desk. And, you know, there has been legislation that he wanted to block before, but couldn't, like, for example, Ukraine aid, which he gets credit for, which he tried to block, but didn't have the constitutional authority to block, which is why he got impeached. So the question should have always been, in my opinion, because it was never his issue to begin with, it's the issue of his base, of the evangelicals, which is banning abortion. The question should have always been, will you veto an abortion ban? And until very recently, he wouldn't answer the question. He would dodge it in every interview, including the debate with Biden, I believe, and in recent conversations as well, recent interviews. And only recently did he finally say, yes, he would. But it's because we're like less than 30 days out from the election. And considering how Trump has flip-flopped on TikTok and all sorts of issues, after talking to some TikTok owners, now he's in favor of TikTok, even though before he thought it was a national security risk. Like, to me, doesn't seem like a very strong commitment against banning abortion.
To keep saying that when they,
and if there's members of the party who still want to advance it,
he's not. It's unbelievably disingenuous to keep saying that.
It also doesn't help that he's lied so much that even when he tries to tell the truth, like, people are not going to give him the benefit of the doubt.
Ban. He's not. It's unbelievably disingenuous to keep saying that when they know he's not. He's repeatedly said he's not. Everything that I've seen with Trump around abortion is that actually he hovers around the kind of 15-week term limit, which makes him actually, certainly by Republican standards, extremely moderate. Why do the Democrat leadership keep pretending and lying, frankly, that he wants a federal abortion ban?
Look, I mean, I think that some of this is standard politics. I don't actually agree with that. Do we know? Have we gotten a clear answer? Trump didn't really give one at the debate. You know, if the Republicans take the Senate and the House this time, which is very possible, Mike Johnson does support would be the Speaker of the House, does support a federal ban. Are we sure Trump wouldn't sign that? I don't think that that's out of the realm of possibility.
I would be 100% sure, not least to which because his wife, Melania, in her new book, has just come out and said the complete opposite.
Who gives a fuck? Who gives a fuck what his wife said? Since when was Donald Trump controlled by the whims of his current spouse? If that was the case, he wouldn't have cheated on her with an affair while she was pregnant with his son. If he can't respect her when it comes to something as basic as the birth of their child, then I don't know how they're going to respect her when it comes to reproductive health care rights, in her opinion. She's not the president. She's his wife. He's the president.
Then we agree.
So,
okay.
I mean, but here's my point. You're very, yeah, but Tim, hang on, Tim. You're keen, yeah, sure. And I understand why you're keen to hammer Trump about not telling the truth and telling lies and so on. And there's no doubt he often tells lies. But when I see Kamala Harris and Tim Walz both deliberately lying in the way they are about abortion and Trump's intent on that, I think that is also very unacceptable and disingenuous. Do you agree?
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't use the word unacceptable. Look, I think it is a little disingenuous. What I would call it is doing politics. I think both sides do politics. I think Dan's been doing politics over here on this interview. I don't think it's 100% sure that the Trump administration would. I just think that's to say that you are certain that they wouldn't sign a federal abortion ban. I think is wrong. I think it's a legitimate.
I'll bet you $100,000.
Look, okay, wait. Again, sign federal abortion ban that he has to sign. Just do nothing. Just abstain. What if he said, like, I would just want Congress to decide? Just like I let the states decide, I'll let Congress decide. You think that's a crazy thing that Trump would never say if he got just that enough evangelical money? Especially if Trump doesn't have to worry about getting reelected. I don't think it's like an issue he's particularly passionate about one way or the other. I think he just sees it as electoral poison for the right, as we have seen from the midterms.
But here's the thing.
He doesn't sign a federal abortion ban to charity.
Piers.
To charity.
No, here's the thing.
$100,000 of your money.
And let me remind Tim of something. Let's remind Tim of something because I'm in Congress and I know what we vote on and what we don't vote on. The only thing that a Republican majority has put on the floor regarding abortion has been a born alive bill to say that if.
Wow, is it because you guys wouldn't be able to pass? You don't control the Senate. If you passed it through the Senate, the House, you would just get the Senate and would die. So you don't pass. Why put in the? I mean, I don't know if this really means anything. This is like, hey guys, did you know when Trump wasn't president? When Trump was president, the Democrats didn't pass DACA legislation to help them get citizenship. Yeah, who would have thought? Who would have thought?
in a botched abortion, if the baby is still alive, you can't kill it.
And I agree with
and only but
And even if they controlled the Senate and the House, Biden would just veto it because he's committed to veto it.
a couple of Democrats actually voted for that. And I'm sure that's a normal thing that 99% of people, including yourself, would agree with. That's the only thing that Mike Johnson or Kevin McCarthy have ever put on the floor. So
okay, but that's also because Mike Johnson hasn't been House Speaker when they had a Senate majority, a House majority, and the presidency. I would imagine that Congress would function differently if they controlled the three houses that you would expect them to. You expect them to legislate like they just won a fucking election.
you can guess, you can do all the guesswork in the world that you want. All we have to do is look at our own history about what we actually have done on this issue. And you're going to get a pretty good answer about what we will do on this issue.
Yeah, let me turn to.
Piers,
hang
can I
on,
just
hang
say
on.
one thing on this,
I want to move on to immigration, because I think it's another
he's getting steamrolled
potential
all night
big
by Piers.
Achilles heel for Kamala Harris, which is that she, whether people want to admit it now on the left or not, indisputably was the border czar. You know, MSNBC and many other Democrat skewed television pundits and networks and so on all perpetrated this idea that she was the new border czar, that Biden had put her in charge of sorting out the southern border crisis, and it's clearly been a spectacular failure, which is why they're desperate not to call her the border czar. Now, she was asked again about this on 60 Minutes. Let's take a look. The problem, Tim, is that she can spin it any way she likes, but the reality...
Was there like a clip here that we missed? It feels like there was a clip that they cut out. Why did they cut it out? I wanted to hear about... I don't know if the content... whatever.
Is the reality that the southern border remains an absolute basket case of a crisis with unbelievable numbers of people coming in on a daily basis. And it's on her, isn't it?
It doesn't remain that way. It's getting better. I'm not going to disagree with your point about the. I think there's a legitimate criticism of the Biden administration in the first few years on the border. But again, I don't think that the other offering is better. The idea that you would trust a Donald Trump and a Stephen Miller administration to do a mass deportation of tens of millions of people.
Do you know who deported Tim? Did you know who deported?
You interrupt me, but not Dan as much.
Do you know who deported the most people in the history of the United States?
Obama deported a lot of people. I don't know if it was the most, but I assume that's where you're going.
Not a lot of people. Barack Obama deported over 3 million people, which pro rata made him the biggest deporter of people in the history of presidencies. Right, a Democrat. Barack Obama.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that fact check. But I'm not saying I'm against any deportations. Obviously, we need to deport some people. I'm saying that I do not trust the Donald Trump administration that did child separations, that is going to have Stephen Miller in charge of the immigration regime.
Obama separated people, kids and families.
To do a mass deportation. And another good reason not to trust them is you're doing this performative thing where I'm a little bit upset about how Kamala's exaggerating on this or that. But like Donald Trump is making up just flat out lies, inhuman lies about people that are in this country illegally and planning to deport them, saying he will deport like the Haitian migrants who have legal status here in this country. He went on a national TV stage and said that they were stealing pets from their neighbors and eating them. Like, this is so mean and so inhumane. Think about For
the record, I thought that was completely wrong, and I think it backfired. It backfired hideously for him. Yeah, but the bigger picture. Let me come to Dan.
How can you trust a person? Can I just say one last thing? I just don't. How can you trust a person like this? How can you trust a person whose character is like this, who will lie, who will tell you that he won when he lost, who will tell you that people here legally are eating pet animals and stealing them, who will tell you that we're not helping people who are suffering from Hurricane Helene? Like, he is a bad person that lies and tells cruel and inhumane lies.
Let me go to Dan.
All the time. How do you defend that type of
bad orange man argument? The bad
Dan, your response.
The bad orange man.
It's so it's so disingenuous. Like, oh, so you're saying like you could be like Donald Trump just kicked that baby out in the street. He curb stomped him like over and over and over again. Yes, okay. I didn't vote for him because I thought he was Jesus. Like, orange man bad? He just talked about how he's cooking up a hate storm that if, it's causing death threats and bomb threats in Springfield. And then he's now, after causing them death threats and bomb threats, is offering the mass deportation of those people anyway, even though they're here legally, and they keep getting it wrong. He keeps calling them illegal, even though they're here completely documented. Almost like it's not even about whether they're documented or not. So it's like, in the response to that is, oh, Orange Man bad. No, no, it's not about Orange Man being bad. It's about bomb threat bad. It's about intimidation and vandalism of Haitian homes bad. It's about intimidating the legal immigrants after we heard so much talk about, I'm okay with immigrants. You just need to come here the legal way. Okay, they come here the legal way. They buy houses at above market values, and then they work here. And then what are we supposed to do? We're supposed to deport them anyway because Trump came up with a fairy tale about them, and now he has to deport them to feel better? Like, what? And the only response you have is Orange Man bad. Oh, that's what you're called. No, it has to do with bomb threat bad. It has to do with lie bad. It's the things that Donald Trump does that is bad.
Dan, he's bad. You know who said he was bad? You said that he was an insane idiot.
Let Dan answer.
In like literally 2015. So and he might have gotten the cats in.
What does that matter? Okay, I said he was an insane idiot in 2015. Okay, what made you call him an insane idiot then? That has changed. That makes him no longer an insane idiot now. Because in my mind, the stuff he was saying then would make him an insane idiot. But then when he starts saying stuff now about, Haitians eating dogs and pets, that sounds like someone who is both insane and an idiot would say.
Dogs wrong, but you know what's not wrong? Lake and Riley. That's not a fake story. Okay, here in Houston, Jocelyn.
Oh, I didn't know. Was she lynched by Haitians? Because I don't think that has anything to do with Springfield, Ohio. Is this how it's going to work now? Because J.D. Vance said it was okay that they lied because at least they brought attention to the issue of immigration. So that, I guess, is the moral fiber of the party. It's okay to lie to you. It's okay for, the VP candidate who could very well become president. Again, he's 78 years old. Oldest nominee ever. It's okay to lie. It's fine that he lied. That's perfectly okay. Okay. And now, any immigrant story, any story about anybody that was hurt by an undocumented immigrant, we can now use that as an answer to Trump attacking legal immigrants. Not only would that not necessarily work for undocumented immigrants, because you'd have to talk about, I think, broader crime rates and other stuff. Putting that aside, we're not even talking about the same classification of people here. This group was here legally, was documented, that we knew where they were. The other person was undocumented. It's totally different. It's not even in the same ballpark. And you're using it as a defense? There is no defense. It's just like the tariffs thing. If there's no defense, pivot out.
Nungri. That's not a fake story. These are people who shouldn't have gotten into the country in the first place and then committed horrible rapes and murders. There are tens of thousands of more crimes that have been committed. And people are understandably upset about those crimes. Why? Because you've already committed a crime before you committed that crime. You came in illegally, and you came in illegally because this administration undid every executive order that Trump had in place to try and fix the problem, and they created a massive, massive new problem. And you say we can't trust Trump? Like, well, again, that's an emotional argument, because all we have to do is look at the history of his policies, his executive orders. No, stop interrupting me. It is an emotional argument, because an objective argument would be, okay, what is somebody going to do? Well, they already had the job once. So I have a feeling that they're probably going to do the same policies that got the border under control the first time. And they're going to immediately re-implement those policies that got the border under control. How is that an emotional argument?
You're making an emotional argument.
That's an objective argument based on history. That's based on history.
You're saying I have a feeling. This is like saying, all right, man, I got hammered at the bar, and I drove 90 miles an hour down the highway, and I spun out, and we circled around, and I landed straight. And that means I should just get hammered and drive again, because last time we barely survived with only a little insurrection. We had a mild insurrection. Look.
Ah, God, man. He's not even the good type of Southerner, Dan. He's not the type that's a little folksy with it. Like, yeah, a hit dog hollers. You can't get that, like, story and what that's supposed to represent. It represents Donald Trump with no political experience, surrounded by people. He would then go on to fire because they didn't engage in enough worship of him. They did not engage in sycophancy over him and over his stupid ideas of either invading Venezuela or nuking hurricanes. If that's true or not, we still don't know. Sharpie Gate. That's not something you can deny. We can see that he took out a Sharpie to extend a hurricane's range, which I could say, hey, lying about a hurricane in order to make himself look better, trying to scribble on public resources. This is a sign that's meant to indicate the path of a hurricane for the public, for their safety, and he's scribbling on it to make himself look better. And now we have another hurricane happening. He's spreading misinformation about it again. You think in 2 years to a Donald Trump presidency, if we have another hurricane and he's surrounded by sycophants and not people who are actually managers, that we couldn't go a little worse next time, even though we didn't go exactly perfect last time? Kobe and the towels for the people of Puerto Rico. Yeah, I mean, I think that, for example, last time you had a Mike Pence to grab the steering wheel and to help get it straight. Next time, J.D. Vance is going to keep his hands behind his head. So yes, I think not only are you doing the same thing, driving 90 miles an hour drunk, but now you've also cut the brake cables and your co-pilot isn't drunk. He just doesn't care.
Look, Dan,
Listen,
character matters. You know that.
I'll help you out.
Dan,
I'll help
you
you
wrote
out
a
with
whole
your
book about
metaphors,
this.
okay?
Character matters. It does. In a
I'll help
leader,
you out with the
character
metaphors
matters. You
here.
cannot lie about people. You cannot advance racist lies, and you cannot tell people that our elections are fraudulent when they're real. You cannot tell people that they're eating pets, that the government doesn't care about you, that the country's going to end. All of these lies that he tells. That affects the country, man.
Okay, so your argument is that you do not like his character. Right? You've made that very clear. But again,
it's objective
the
point about
choice
his
on the
character, about
ballot
these
is,
lies.
Always the same thing. You don't like him because he's mean, because he's orange man, no, he just said a bunch of things that he's done. He's talked about the fact that, okay, lying is a thing you do. And you could say it's bad for his moral character. I don't care if his kids like him. I don't care if Barron loves him or hates him. I don't care if his wife loves or hates him. I honestly don't care if he cheats on his wife. I mean, there's a hypocrisy thing you can bring up, part of family values, cheating on his wife while she's pregnant with him, with his son, with a porn star, then lies about it, then pays off the porn star, pays him hush money. You usually don't pay people hush money for moral things, but it doesn't have to do with that. It has to do with the actions he's taking and the lies that he has that has an effect on people. The president of the United States has many jobs, and one of them is to be a figurehead. And during a national crisis, you need a calm hand, a steady voice. You need something to just be, hey guys, calm voice, steady hand. We have these issues. We got this public health issue. This is what we need to do in response. And if he's out there using it as a partisan opportunity to attack people, or he's just spreading lies about it, he's shooting from the hip on like public health knowledge he doesn't have, like when C-19 was taken away by the heat. I keep bringing that up, but I mean, it's probably the most ridiculous version. Oh, C-19 is probably going to be taken away by the heat anyway. Do that with a hurricane. Do that with a flood. Do that with a war. Do that with a public health crisis.
Lies. It's not about me.
That's fine, but then another objective point would be what our choice is in this election, and the choice is not a question, a yes or no question on whether you think Trump has a perfect character. That's not the question on the ballot. The question on the ballot is about who will do a better job running the country for the next 4 years. And this is a really interesting case where we actually have 4 years from each candidate, where we know exactly what their policies are going to be and what their outcomes are going to be. And on every metric, Trump wins on those metrics. You may still not like his character, and I'm not going to try and convince you to.
He doesn't win on all the metrics. He doesn't win on all of them. Again, we need to talk about the economic metrics. The Biden administration actually beat him on certain unemployment ratings. I mean, the stock markets are higher than they were under Trump, which he constantly cited as a measurement of his success while in office. So I don't know why Biden couldn't. I don't think it's that simple. But if Trump's going to use it as a measurement of success, then surely I'm going to when comparing his record to Biden. I mean, he's better. Biden's better on the issue of abortions. Biden's been much more steady of a hand when it comes to the executive branch's role in foreign policy. I think he knew how to respond to Russia in a way that made me a lot more comfortable that we weren't going to go into nuclear war than how Trump would have responded. Mr. Rocket Man would have responded? How did he deal with the North Koreans? How did that go? Like, I don't know. It's one thing to say the economic metric, which is like a conservative talking point I've heard for a while, but to say on every metric when there's somebody else in the room to push back against you, and now they can choose freely whatever metric they want, including, for example, the deficit, which is a simple one to point towards, one that I think that Dan Crenshaw historically would have fought very aggressively on, but it's now not even an issue I hear about from the right wing anymore.
On the metrics, he wins on every single one.
That's not right, though.
Name one where
That's
he
not
doesn't.
right. The metrics only.
The deficit. He's going to have a bigger deficit than Biden and Harris.
The metrics.
If you compare their plans, Harris has a much smaller deficit than Trump. So if you're a traditional fiscal conservative who wants a small deficit or no deficit or even a surplus, there's not really an option for a surplus. There's no option for getting rid of the deficit, but there is an option for having a smaller deficit.
Only count for him if you stop the metrics before COVID happens, because COVID wasn't his fault. I actually agree with this. I don't blame Trump for COVID, but you can't say that all of the job loss that happened, the huge spike in crime that happened in 2020 while Trump was president, you cannot say that that was not his fault because of COVID. But then everything that happened in 2021 on, the COVID had nothing to do with any of that. That's all Biden's policies. Look, we had this huge disruption that happened under Trump. And if you actually just look at the metrics,
of course I
you want
can,
to say
because
metrics. If you look at just the metrics,
can look
at
really?
things that
were
jobs,
passed.
it's
Come on. You could have just been quiet. You could have just been quiet and just let him take his point. You really are going to stick your neck out to, you can't talk about the effect on the economy during Trump or any of it. But of course, 2021, by that time, COVID was over. There was no economic effect from it. There was nope. Like all the other G7 countries that were having slumps, nah, that was kind of just spontaneous. The international inflation issue, also spontaneous. All Biden, actually.
it's better under Biden. Sorry, that's just facts. Those are metrics.
That was debunked in the last debate that they had on this.
Let me switch
on the crime issue. And look, and you know this very well. Like, you know that across the country, crime is spiking because left-wing district attorneys and left-wing judges are letting criminals out on $1 bonds, and they go out and murder. Okay, what do you mean crime is going down? That was debunked.
About 2020
that was a claim that was made by CBS during the election. And yeah, let's talk about 2020. Was that a bunch?
What does he mean that that's been debunked? Who debunked it? Who debunked that crime is going down? It was debunked during the last debate. Who debunked it? Vance debunked it? Trump debunked it? I know Trump didn't debunk it.
Bunch of Republicans out there.
Vance was complaining about the fact checking, so I don't know if he was fact checking the. I don't remember.
Causing $2 billion in damage. Was that a bunch of Republican rioters?
No, but it wasn't a bunch of Biden supporters.
No, of course not.
Well,
Was Trump asking governors to put the National Guard in to stop it? Yes, of course he was. All right. Was governors like Tim Walz preventing that from happening and allowing many?
So we could say that Trump has acted and can act during a riot before, but when he's in the Capitol watching it all happen for 3 hours and does nothing, that's not an indication of anything. Just ignore it. It's probably not that bad.
Was to be burned down? Of course he was.
Why didn't he do that in D.C.? I agree. The rioting was bad during 2020. The people that were rioting weren't waving Kamala Harris flags. Okay, they were Antifa. They were saying they're the same people that say Genocide Joe. This is not the Democratic establishment. There were Trump flags over the Capitol as cops were getting attacked. Trump flags over the Capitol as cops were getting attacked. That was Donald Trump's fault.
I think this is the first time I've ever seen somebody on one of these shows say, like, really? You're gonna say like the Antifa people are like they're the Democrat, they're the Bidens. These are the people in line to vote for Harris, and then also Brooks. Really, these people? I think this is the first time I've seen that actually confronted directly on one of these shows before, which I gotta give Miller credit for.
He said
because I'm gonna say that a decent many of those people are not voting for Harris, and they are in my DMs and not happy usually.
Hang on. We've already done January 6th.
With that.
I want to turn chaps to foreign policy. Dan,
I love that.
With your military record, I'd be interested in what you feel about this. there are obviously going to be three big issues, it seems to me, for the incoming president, whoever that is. One, the Russia-Ukraine war. Secondly, the Israel war with Hamas, now Hezbollah, and potentially a war directly with Iran. Who would be, obviously, I know that you would say Trump, but from a military perspective, who do you think the members of the American armed forces would feel more comfortable about having at the helm, given these three, and of course the ongoing threat of China?
I mean, it depends on which soldier and which theater. Like, if you're in Europe, I know soldiers in the European theater, and I mean, it's hard to say if they bend one way. If I had to guess, they probably bend towards the people who don't want to completely divert investment from you. I mean, I don't know. It's hard. This is it's a weird way to frame the question. I would say that they broadly are more on the side of probably Trump, or like a harder policy when it comes to Israel and Palestine, but then when it comes to Europe, it's probably more of a flip. Like, it depends on the soldier. You get soldiers from every sector of society. I mean, it's like there's overrepresented, like soldiers are on average going to be more conservative, but I mean, that doesn't necessarily match for every like right-wing Republican issue. For example, like servicemen in Europe tend to be supportive of NATO.
Given these big geopolitical issues that are raging right now?
Yeah, you predicted.
It's really weird that he decided to make like 2 Middle East ones and not one on Taiwan, or like, but whatever.
What I'm going to say, and I'm going to say it, and I know that based on the troops' reactions to Trump himself. I'm still in very close touch with my own friends, most of which are still active duty. These are people who are going to support Trump. They like the 4 years.
Hey, when I was in the military, I made a bunch of buddies, and they tend to agree with me on things. And the people in the military that I hanged out with and were my buddies, yeah, they agree with me. Well, okay.
Years under Trump. We didn't make a lot of huge errors. We went after the bad guys in strategic ways. I mean, Trump escalated against ISIS in Syria.
I'm sorry to tell you, but there's cliques everywhere. There's cliques in traditional jobs, there's cliques in school, and there's also cliques in the military.
Went after the bad guys in strategic ways. I mean, Trump escalated against ISIS in Syria, then pulled back. That's usually what people want to see.
What do they mean he escalated against ISIS in Syria? I keep hearing this, but all they talk about is like the bombing campaign, but that was just a continuation of Operation Inherent Resolve, which was an Obama-started operation back in like 2014. Wasn't 2014, 2015, something along those lines. So like, what do you mean he escalated against ISIS? I don't know what he means by escalate against ISIS. Did the bombing pick up?
Under Trump, we had the Abraham Accords. We were making extreme progress towards peace in the Middle East. You had a maximum pressure campaign on Iran. We were not soft on Iran. We didn't pay them off in the hopes that they'd provide a better future. No, instead we killed one of their generals, Soleimani, and which was justice for a lot of Americans that he was responsible for killing. We said openly that we supported Israel, no questions asked. He told Putin, do not invade Ukraine. And by the way, gave Ukraine the javelins and the stingers, and they're the only reason that Kiev wasn't taken by Russian tanks, because of those.
Oh my God, get off the dick. I'm sorry, man. You gotta get like a seat cushion to drive around. Really? Come on. Okay, first off, the only reason that the Russians didn't take it, don't only just get off Trump's schlong. Get off the schlong of American defense companies. Get off the schlong of the United States, generally speaking. Okay, the javelins helped. The stingers, they helped. But they were part of just a tiny part of a larger defense picture. The vast majority of the equipment that was used back then, and it's still true today, was Soviet-era equipment. And when you look at the Bayraktar drones and other Western countries that was also providing munitions, it wasn't even only Soviet stuff. There was other Western stuff too. But yes, the javelins played a role. But if you think that they were going to take Kiev with that army, in retrospect, looking back, if they didn't have the javelins, that's just not the case. It probably would have been harder to take out tanks. Maybe they would have entered the streets of Kiev, but they never even got into Kiev to do the fighting. They got stopped before they got in Kiev, a city of 3.5 million. I'm talking about a city like Bakhmut, that's 150,000 or something, and how bloody that battle was. You're telling me at that era, when Ukraine also had the most shells and storage and stuff, that is going to be the era that, no, it helped. It helped destroy a lot of these tanks. It was helpful. Get off Trump and America's throng. That's the first thing. Second thing, Trump held up the aid in order to try to get dirt on his political opponent, Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, unconstitutionally, and got impeached for it. So I don't really know if we can really give that to him, if he was the person holding up the process the whole time. He didn't author the legislation. Other people did. Other people did. While Rex Tillerson was trying to play catch up with the rest of the administration, covering for Trump as he was saying, oh, well, maybe we do stop sending the aid to Ukraine during the conversations with Putin. Anyway, putting all that aside, Trump saying don't invade Ukraine was not what stopped an invasion of Ukraine. The Russia, and this is my belief. I think that Putin would have invaded if Biden was president, Obama was president, if Trump was president. Honestly speaking, and this might be given too much credit to Hillary, but I think it's true. The only one they probably wouldn't have invaded under would have been Hillary Clinton. I think the Russians hated Hillary with such a passion. They despised her. They hated her because of what happened to Gaddafi. They hated her because she was always still a hawk on the Russians compared to some of the others, like Obama, which were, to be quite frank, a lot softer. Clinton was always the one administration going harder. Hillary, during this period, might have been one of the few to actually intimidate them with the idea of a no-fly zone. Not to say that she would actually do it, but I don't think she'd be so quick to shoot it down either. And so Hillary Clinton would be absolutely terrifying for the Russians on this, because she's been consistently standing up to them. She's been consistently advocating for some of the more aggressive responses, and she's been surrounded by people who also would want an aggressive response. And so I think 2022, which would have been 2 years before the end of her term if she was elected in 2016, I think she might have been one of the few that might have actually been able to intimidate them off the idea of direct American involvement. And that's the only way I think the Russians could have been avoided. Not by us saying we'll send them a bunch of aid, not by us saying we'll support the Ukrainians, by us suggesting that American troops could go on the ground and there's going to be Russian troops fighting American troops on the street. And she might not do it, but she might let the idea fizzle enough, and they might hate her enough that they might believe it. That's the only scenario I see. Because I think any other type of support outside of direct American involvement has the problem of delays. You send aid to Ukraine, there's a delay. If you send tanks, it's going to take time to get there. Anything else takes time to get there. The Russians thought the war was going to be over in a week. So if the Russians thought the war was going to be over in a week, then all that aid doesn't matter, because either they're going to capture it or it won't get there in time. So, for example, if Trump was to say, I'll support Ukraine all the way with all the food, I'll give them every gun, they'd either not buy it because Trump flip-flops all the time, or if they did buy it, they'd be like, okay, the government will collapse anyway. Because they thought the war was going to last like that. And if the war was going to be that quick, then the Americans wouldn't have much time to respond anyway. That was the bet. The bet was quick, curb stomp, Americans won't even have the time to do anything about it. Just like Crimea, which is what happened to the Obama administration during Crimea. So, honestly, the only administration I think that might have dissuaded them is Hillary, and even then, I'm being very generous in saying that. And it would be only under certain conditions where they could threaten, or she would be willing to threaten, some version of American direct involvement, even if it meant a no-fly zone, etc. Not necessarily deliver on it, but at least threaten it.
Burns is an immoral, morally corrupt.
Hey, the Grain Man, thank you for the resub with a prime. Hello, Comrade Burns. Good day to you. The KGB would like to extend a jolly happy birthday, an extra 100K for your efforts. Consistent with our other media associates. Please keep up the good work, and may have a good day in the Maryland Oblast. Thank you. Thank you, Tavaj.
Those weapons that the Obama administration had refused to give them. We didn't pull out of Afghanistan, right? And people like to blame Trump. Well, you would have pulled out. Well, he didn't. And we didn't give up that strategic base in Bagram that was close to.
He negotiated the withdrawal. He did the Doha agreement when negotiated over the heads of our Afghan allies, killing their confidence. It wasn't the only thing, of course, but it was one of many things killing their confidence. And then the whole withdrawal was kind of a mess, to put it lightly. But he negotiated the withdrawal. It was his Doha agreement. He laid the foundations for it. You cannot be angry that a house was made when he laid down the foundations for the home.
To China, Pakistan, ISIS, keeping the Taliban at bay. All of those bad foreign policy decisions happened almost immediately after Trump left. And so when you ask American military service members who they prefer, they tend to prefer the guy that actually means what he says when he says peace through strength. And I get it, like a lot of people on my side don't understand the strength part. You know, you mentioned Tucker Carlson, not a fan of his, okay? He's one of them. He doesn't get the strength part. But Trump does, and that's important. I think the people coming in on the national security front back into this administration.
I don't know if he knows what strength is, because if he knew what strength is, he would be all in favor of continuing full steam ahead with public support for Ukraine aid. Because if the Russians saw both Harris and Trump saying, Ukraine, 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 send all the support, then he'd be like, oh man, no matter what happens, they're going to get aid. The Ukrainians are in a better negotiating position, and therefore, through strength, you could have peace through strength, because they would have to negotiate peace. But by him just saying, no, well, you know, we send too much aid, and he's a salesman, and, you know, we need to... You're undercutting the negotiating position, because if Trump wins, from the Russian point of view, this is the guy that's much more likely to pull out the aid, to pull out the support from under Ukraine, and therefore they're in a worse negotiating position. Maybe even it could encourage them to, well, if they're not going to get aid anymore, might as well press the offensive, huh? So, no, I don't think he fully understands peace through strength. I think he stumbles into something that could be considered a peace through strength position every once in a while, then stumbles into it again and again and again, because I don't think he has any coherent underpinning foreign policy beliefs. If he did believe in what he's saying right here, why would he allow the Turkish invasion of northeastern Syria? And for what purpose? For what reason? What did that derive for the United States when it comes to our confidence that our allies has in us on the ground there, or to fight ISIS? The Turkish invasion of northeastern Syria preceded an increase of ISIS activity, an increase in assassination of tribal elders, and of ISIS recruitment and propaganda being passed out in local villages, and an increase in attacks. Then there was a huge attack on the prison. Point is, like, that withdrawal did a lot of damage to stability in that part of the country, and ISIS seeps into unstable environments.
Are very much adults in the room. Mike Pompeo, Robert O'Brien. These are good people who truly understand the nature of the world and do not see it through these starry-eyed glasses that I think the Obama administration did and this last administration did.
Yeah, I mean, Tim Miller, when I hear Kamala now suddenly boasting about being a gun owner and firing off her weapons, it all sounds a little bit desperate to try and present herself as a potential commander-in-chief who at least knows how to fire a gun. There can't be...
Honestly, the gun thing doesn't surprise me at all. She was a prosecutor, and she... I mean, if anything, if I was them, I'd sell, like, of course she needed a gun. She's in California. She wants to take your guns away, but then she wants a gun for herself to protect herself from the criminal she's unleashed. I would pitch it differently, okay? If you want to... There's a more caustic attack pattern you could choose.
Much doubt, though, that Kamala Harris, she doesn't instill in me, and I'm sure she wouldn't in you, a sense of being a natural commander-in-chief, does she?
Sorry, I don't even know what that means. Oh my God, she's not coming off as a serious commander-in-chief because she has a gun and it's not taken seriously for some reason. What do you mean serious? This is the type of question that makes me think, like, is it because she's a woman? I'm not someone to, like, pivot to that, really, because I think usually it's weak. And even if it isn't weak, it's really hard to prove. But when I hear things like, how could she be taken seriously as a commander-in-chief? Talk about inexperience. Don't talk about, like, with a gun. Be like, she has never served on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. She's never served, like how Biden has. You can, like, pull it from something. Pull it from something. Don't just be vaguely like she doesn't come off as strong. You think Trump makes America look strong to everyone when he's getting laughed at the UN all the time? He might look strong to some people, like the Iranians They despise Trump because Trump is really tough on the Iranians for both domestic electoral reasons and I think some geopolitical, but mostly domestic electoral reasons. But if you're somebody else and he has a totally different perspective on you, like, for example, Putin, it's going to be different.
It feels like something that for you and your therapist, I think, Piers, because she does.
But so, but when you think like just strength, like what is it because he comes off as strong, because he looks angry, because people like believe in a wild man theory, like he's crazy, so you don't piss him off. Like that doesn't make you come off as like a serious threat. A lot of people also think he looks like a buffoon.
It feels like something that for you and your therapist, I think, Piers, because she does seem like that to me. I mean, she was in full command again in a debate with Donald Trump. He had plenty of opportunities to demonstrate why she would not be strong on the national stage on national security, and he didn't do it. And if you just listen to our allies, many of them, certainly in private conversations, would feel much more comfortable with Kamala Harris and her experience going to the Munich Security Conference and elsewhere. So look. Again, Tucker Carlson, who this is a person that me and Dan agree on, does not have smart foreign policy. He was influential in picking Trump's VP. He's going to be influential in who is around Trump. Trump's national security team from the first term that Dan keeps praising. It
was his kids and Tucker that put him in the direction of Vance. Doug Burgum looked like a likely candidate until that point, which would have been much smarter for trying to attract moderates.
Support him. His Secretary of Defense, his National Security Advisor, his former General Chief of Staff, his Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, none of them support him. So I think it could be a very different second term when it comes to Donald Trump. And then you just look at his behavior when he's been on his own. We have the Woodward book where we've learned this week that he's had maybe up to 7 private one-on-one conversations with Putin during this period where Putin invaded a Democratic ally. That is deeply alarming. He was sending Putin back-channel COVID tests, apparently. I think that the risk here is very high. I kind of agree with Dan that I thought his foreign policy was pretty good the first couple of years, but the people that were executing that plan are not coming back. There's going to be a new group of more nationalist, more isolationist people and Trump says this.
And look, I don't like John Bolton, right? But John Bolton has a cohesive foreign policy worldview, and these are the people that were getting in and being switched out with other people during the administration, and these people hate him now. If you read John Bolton's book about the Trump administration, you don't need to buy it if you don't want to support them, and you can pirate it. Do whatever you want. It's your life, your morals. If you listen to it, the whole book reads like Trump. From like people can say it's a lie. A lot of what he wrote in the book is all based on his testimony, of course. But my God, if he would have to be writing a perfect Trump, like a perfect fake Trump. In that book
himself, he says, I know who the MAGA people are now. So I would be deeply alarmed about a second term, and I'm deeply alarmed about his relationship with Putin that has been reported between 2021
I mean, all I would say about his relationship,
and I was deeply alarmed. Finally, speaking just on a public thing, even if you don't buy the Woodward, he stood next to Zelensky and talked about how great his relationship with Putin was. I just think across the board,
it should be noted, though, Tim, that Putin didn't pull any stunts under Trump. He only pulled them when Trump was out of office. And I do think there's something about Trump's way with dealing with these leaders of Russia and China and North Korea, which is oddly quite effective. I do.
I think that's
none of them pulled any stunts on his watch. I mean, it may be coincidence, but they didn't.
Yeah,
it's kind of a challenge way to look at the world. It's kind of like saying that 9/11 happened because
Sorry. No, we didn't hear anything. By the way, I agree with Tim before he even says what he said, because I already know what he's going to say, okay? Look, people have this view where if something happens during a presidency, therefore it's that president's fault, or it was done because of the glory of the president. You know, if there's for example, all the economic booms during Clinton, was that due to Clinton, or was a lot of that due to the .com bubble? Like how much was the presidency and how much was, you can't really, there's not like a hard dividing line you can like put anywhere, but it's probably a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B. And I would say that Biden's foreign policy being the same failed foreign policy of both Trump and Obama when it came to appeasement to the Russians on the issue of Ukraine, led to the both start of the war and a continuation from a war when it comes to our policy effect on the war. Of course, it's not only us. The Ukrainians have, the responsibility to defend themselves. Their society was horribly corrupt at the time of 2014, and their military was not able to put up the resistance it should have. But then when they started to take the Donbass back and the Russians directly intervened, they lied about it the whole time, and we kind of just sat there and went do, twirling our thumbs. And while the Russians were invading Ukraine, we weren't even willing to send them any lethal aid after making the commitments that we did in the Budapest Memorandum. And that was just the way of the road. That was the way of the road, not only from America, but from Germany, but from everyone. And I mean, the lethal aid, sending of aid to Ukraine, even that was a little controversial. It was controversial on some of the left too. I saw left-wingers condemning that when it originally happened because, oh, it was so militaristic. And, people didn't know how bad the war was leading up to this. But the Russians had invaded multiple times before then and just lied about it. And both under Obama, Biden, and Trump, they did squat about it, really. Until we got some lethal aid, but that was done by Congress. And so I would say all of them failed in addressing the key issue, which is that there needed to be a counterbalance to either give Ukraine the best negotiating position to find a peaceful settlement, or, if that was not achievable, help Ukraine defend itself until the Russians basically punch themselves out and say, fine, we'll have to accept something that respects your basic human dignity. Because they have been unwilling to do so up to this point.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, we're just engaging in guesswork here when all we have to do is look at 4 years of history. And you see all these people are gone, but they're not gone. Mike Pompeo is not gone.
They're not supporting him.
Again, Robert O'Brien is not gone. Yes, they are. Did you hear the names I just said?
Not
they
as
absolutely
Secretary of
are.
Defense.
There's a high
John Bolton, Rex Tillerson. I don't need to name them all.
high likelihood they'll be in
Neither
the
of his national
administration.
security
Chad, well,
advisors are supporting him, Dan. Dan, neither of his
Yeah,
national
look,
security
you can have a
advisors,
long list
neither
of
John
people-
Bolton
you can
nor
have-
H.R. McMaster are
Robert
supporting him. That's just a
O'Brien.
fact.
Robert O'Brien is definitely
I forgot about H.R. McMaster. Yeah, he isn't supporting him either.
supporting Trump. I think you're confused on that.
Okay,
third
let's
in
move.
any case-
Let's move on.
And Robert O'Brien sees.
Let me
things
move
the way
on.
we
I want to
see
move
it.
on. I want to move on to
Right,
somebody.
again, you're engaging in total guesswork. You're
Let's
engaging
move-
in total guesswork, and all I have to do is compare 4 years to 4 years and show people what that looks like.
Let me move on to
Whose
Elon.
argument's stronger?
I want to move
Mine.
on to Elon Musk, who leapt around the stage with Trump at a rally back at the scene, of course, of the assassination attempt. Let's take a look at this.
I mean, would we say that like World War II was caused by FDR because he was president at the time, or was there other factors at play? Of course, he could have had a bigger impact, maybe supporting early. But when you just say that everything that happens to the presidency is completely up to that president, even though the failures again were repeated by previous presidents, it was a failure of American policy, not of any one particular American presidency. If there was any presidency that has the most to blame, in my opinion, and I'm sorry, but this is my opinion for all you Obama stands out there, it's Barack Obama's presidency, because he had the point at the start to most clearly stop it when the Russians invaded Crimea and lied about it the whole time. To call up the Budapest Memorandum, say, we will respect this. We made them give up their nuclear weapons. We will not let this credibility to nuclear nonproliferation in the goal of it to be damaged in this manner. We will not allow war to re-enter the European continent and land grabs. And even if it doesn't end with Ukraine getting Crimea back, even if that wasn't the end point, maybe the Russians would have been like, oh, maybe we don't try anything in Odessa. Maybe we don't try anything in Kharkiv. Maybe we don't try anything in Donetsk right now. Maybe not Luhansk right now. We need to back off for a bit. And even that would have been leagues of improvement from what we got. Anyway, I'm dreaming right now. Maybe I'm sure if in this alternative history scenario, there would have been also some other bad outcomes that I can't analyze, but man can dream.
He created the first major American car company in generations, and his rocket company is the only reason we can now send American astronauts into space. Come here. Take over, Elon. Yes, take over.
Hi, everyone.
Why am I watching this? Why am I watching Elon now? I thought we were talking about foreign policy. Why are we listening to... Okay, whatever. I never watched it. I purposely avoided reacting to this on stream because it was painful. I I'm sorry if somebody wanted me to react in this stream. I didn't want to, because this is painful to watch. This is painful to watch.
As you can see, I'm not just MAGA, I'm dark MAGA.
What is dark MAGA, Dan? Do you know?
Dark MAGA.
I actually don't know. Look at that.
What do you make of Elon Musk? He's all in, he says, now for Trump. Is that helpful to Trump, or is that going to whip up more anti-Trump sentiment as well at the same time?
I don't see what kind of anti-Trump sentiment it would whip up. I do think it's helpful.
Trump has like Elon has a 37% approval rating. So I think like financing he could help, but it's kind of a little late for that. I mean, I don't know. I don't think his endorsement is flipping anybody, honestly. I think really the information stream impact on Twitter is probably the biggest impact he can have, not his personal endorsement.
I think, look, I mean, Elon's a major figure in U.S. culture and politics. Some people love him, some people hate him. But I think a lot more people like him, and at the very least, they respect him. And they respect
polling does not reflect that. Again, 38% approval rating.
His judgment. I mean, this is a guy who's built multi-billion-dollar companies very successfully. He's extremely smart. And I think people view him as pretty objective as well. And so to see him pushing for Trump, which at first might seem outside of his more even-keeled personality, but he's doing it because of policies. And this is, again, what I always come back to. We can talk about character flaws in every politician, including me, that will ever run for anything. And those character flaws are real because none of us are perfect, and maybe some are less perfect than others. But in the end, there are policies and there are outcomes associated with those policies. And I think somebody like Elon Musk is looking at that. What is good for America? What is good for American innovation? What is good for our role as leaders around the world? And what is good for our economy? A guy who knows, I think, a little bit about economics. And he's saying, these policies from Kamala Harris are bad. These policies from Donald Trump are much better. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, he's also saying that if Harris wins, that we're going to get full social democrat communism within 4 years because we're going to legalize all the illegal immigrants. They're all going to vote Democrat, and then we're going to have a one-party state. I'm not exaggerating. That is his current narrative on Twitter. That's the thing he's pushing. So he's in La La Land. We can't even get a deal after 8 years of Obama on the Dreamers, and he thinks we're going to legalize all undocumented immigrants in the United States within a single term. He thinks that's gonna happen. No, he's in La La Land, so I don't think his priorities are in line. I don't think they're up to snuff.
He is all in for Trump, and it's not an insignificant endorsement. He's got one of the biggest platforms in the world now, but as the owner of X. Are you concerned that may help tip things Trump's way?
I think it helps Trump. I think it's super significant. The only thing that concerns me with Elon really is the recklessness with which he, like, for example, this past week was sharing false information about how the FAA was banning recovery planes and groups that wanted to come in and help with the recovery of Helene. He was spreading a bunch of false stuff about how the FEMA is blocking that, which is untrue, until the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, had to call him and give him the facts. Like that's a little alarming that he's engaging in that, but I do think he helps Trump. I do, just because Congressman has kept coming back to this. If you don't mind, I'd just like to say very briefly that he ended the last answer by saying that his argument is stronger because if you just look at the 4 years. And again, I do just need to remind us that kind of just acts as if 2020 didn't happen, because Donald Trump left the White House in 2020 with record unemployment, with crime skyrocketing, and with blood of police officers on our Capitol. That's how he left. And went back to Mar-a-Lago. That's how he left. So I think if you just objectively look at those 4 years, I think you can see why his character flaws and his policy failures, really, but mostly why his character flaws led to bad outcomes. And I got cut off earlier, but Dan wrote this in his book. He wrote that a culture characterized by self-pity, indulgence, outrage, and resentment is a culture that falls apart. And I think that's true about a country and a party, that if you're led by someone that is full of self-pity, indulgence, outrage, and resentment, that describes Donald Trump better than anything I've ever heard, actually. I think that is going to lead to a country that falls apart. I think we saw that with the chaos surrounding the election and COVID as Trump left office, and I think that we would see a similar chaos again if we put him back.
It's a good closer.
Dan, final word to you in response to that.
I mean, one thing to say is you keep blaming Trump for skyrocketing crime under the last year when
That's what
COVID ravaged.
We're grabbing
the
on
world.
to? Okay.
We're one of the few countries that I think came out of that much better off than others. And to the extent that certain states didn't, and this is the data all shows this.
But none of that is to, of course, the recovery plans that were passed during the Biden administration. Of course, those were just evil inflationary policies. But the Trump stimulus bills, no, that wasn't inflationary. That wasn't inflationary. That government spending was good, saving of the world. But anything past that, that was bad. Even though, again, we're recovering better than all the other G7 countries.
Worse crime and worse outcomes under COVID, it's because they were run by Democrats who kept their businesses locked down too long and also did not enforce the law against criminals that were rioting in the streets. Now, you cannot blame the president for that. And you know that because you know your civics lessons pretty well. You know that, and yet you're making a dishonest argument and trying to lay that blame on Trump. You have to be objective about whose fault something is. And even with all of that, the reality is that Biden took control of an economy that it was already back at pre-pandemic GDP levels, with jobs massively. It's false? Fact check it. It is not false. I never say anything that I haven't fact checked.
Go look at the January 2021 number.
It was back at
January 2021 unemployment.
It was back at pre-pandemic real GDP.
No,
I didn't say unemployment. I said real GDP. Unemployment was back down to 6% from 11%. It was well on its way in a recovery phase. That's what happened. And then the Democrats shoved through the American Rescue Plan, almost $2 trillion in just welfare spending, massively increasing demand in an environment where supply was not ready to catch up.
Look, when people say America is recovering better, when I say that,
I wonder how you get.
When I say they're recovering better than all the other G7 countries, why do you think that is? Do you think they came out of nowhere, or do you think the government might have taken an action that could have propelled us forward? And that was the American Rescue Plan combined with the Inflation Reduction Act. On top of there was also the infrastructure. I don't want to get into all the legislation, but these things led to us recovering better, having better consumption. And then when the spending came, and now that the factories are being built and the jobs are being employed, and to some extent, even like the weapons manufacturing is being spent from the Ukraine aid bill, with most of it was actually spent here on American manufacturing. On top of the CHIPS Act, these things had a better recovery impact than if we would have stopped and did nothing else as Trump left the White House. And we were still, while we were headed to a better economy, were we headed to a better economy than all of the other G7 countries, or were we headed to just barely avoiding a recession?
At 9% inflation. Okay, so I'll be happy to give you civics and economics lessons all day long. And you mentioned my book. Look, that thing that I'm worried about, the pity and the self-indulgence and the sense of resentment, yeah, that's true across all populist movements. The left is the definition of a populist movement, because what do I mean by that? Telling people what they want to hear instead of the truth. And that's the Democrat way. Hey, something else is your fault. Somebody else is at fault. Maybe it's because they're a different gender or a different skin color, but they're at fault for your problems. You're not at fault for your problems. So here's a free check. Just vote for me. That's populism, and it's bad. It doesn't matter who's doing it. It's bad.
Don't say that if the entire conversation, while your entire career, you've been a free trade guy, and now at the end, you're going to reject the left-wing economic populism of the American Rescue Plan. When, by the way, populism in what way? Like, would we really call it populism when, like, it is part of Democrat policy that the idea is you would give the tax credit, whatever, it doesn't matter. If that's economic populism, but then you will not condemn a 20% tariff on all goods being imported as a free trader, and instead when asked just say tariffs are good sometimes, then it doesn't sound like you're against economic populism in all instances if it happens to be the candidate that you need to win in 28 days, the person that is proposing the economic populism. You had me a gonzo-style journalist. I drank at Hunter S. Thompson's neighborhood bar back in 1980. I respect all his work but his last. Good stuff. I love Hunter. Now that you've said it, I gotta read Fear and Loathing again. I like the descriptors he uses. I want to integrate more of it into my vocabulary.
And we should, as Americans, understand that and not fall for it. Not fall for this idea that we should burn it all down and destroy everything because the other side is so evil.
Okay, well, you know what, we've reached the point.
Again,
I think we've reached the point,
I have
gentlemen.
4 years to look at how we govern, and I'm comfortable with it.
We have a point where Tim nods and says,
do the right thing.
Where Tim nods and says, I agree, it feels like a good moment to end this actually rather civilized debate, and I appreciate the respectful way you've gone about it. Thank you both very much indeed.
Man, to me, this was still pretty spicy, but I think for Piers Morgan, like, neither of them called for the death of the other, or, you know, nobody called for, like, I want to kill your people will go into the sea. So I guess that is a marked improvement. Follow me on Twitter, DylanBurns1776. Follow me on Instagram, DylanBurnsTV. Join the Discord. Support me on Patreon. Join the website. Good night and good luck, everyone.